Committee for the Holyoke City Council. Tonight's meeting will be broadcast live on the public access channel, Zoom, which we will be recorded, we will be streamed. Translation is being provided for the first time at the committee level. And we have a number of guest department heads and others that are here for, including our mayor, for the supplemental budget we'll get to in about 2 minutes. First of all, we are hybrid because in chambers on members of the committee, besides myself, to my right, Councilor Tallman, to my left, Councilor PUELLO, online, Councilor Anderson Burgos. We should be joined by Councilor Jordan soon. Also city councilors in the chambers, Councilor Jenny Rivera, Councilor Israel Rivera, Councilor Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti, and also online we have Councilor Linda Vacan, Councilor Jose Maldonado Velez, and Councilor Cocaine Givner. I think that's at the moment everybody. We're expecting a few more people. We're going to do this as quickly as possible. This is a little bit unusual, but before we start getting into the supplemental budget, real quick, item number 1 is from the CPA. Megan McGrath-Smith is running a little bit late. I don't see her yet. So why don't we just keep item 1 on?
She's there, but Mr. Chairman, I can make a motion for the roll call, since we are hybrid.
Oh, Councilor Tallman.
Yes, can I make a motion, take a roll call vote that for the purpose of this meeting will be applicable to all motions to remove an item from a table, place items on the table, package items, or suspend the rules unless there is an objection.
Second.
On the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, real quick, item number 1.
Motion to take up item 1.
Motion second to take item 1 off the table. This is a communication, a community preservation committee revised scope of work for fiscal year 2023. This CPA revised scope is for the Wistariahurst Museum restoration of the damaged porch structures project. Off the table for discussion. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? So moved. We welcome newly elected City Councilor Megan McGrath-Smith. Megan, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you and welcome and congratulations. Could you just run us through the revised scope and what you're looking for us to do this evening?
Sure. So this is attached to the contract and to the application where Wistariahurst came to us in order to fix the damage that was caused by the wisteria vines that was causing the porch to be unstable. There was extensive water damage and rot. And when they got into it, the main thing that they realized is that it didn't make sense to continue having the wisteria directly on the building. But the contract language is written specifically to name specific, porch beams and rails. And so it doesn't allow us to also use funding, which there is enough in the scope of the grant in order to do this work without asking for additional funding, to also create trellises that will be installed off of the beams so that the wisteria will be permanently held away from the building to prevent future damage to the building. So if I could share screen, I'm happy to show an image of the work if you want to see it.
Sure.
You should be all set.
Thank you. Okay. So this is the exterior of the building, and you can see that effectively what they've planned to do is to build these exterior trellises over the existing beam so that it will come down and protect the building from the wisteria while still being able to have the wisteria that, is the basis of the name of this building. So they're going to put 6-inch sonotube concrete footings for the trellises, and then they're going to put galvanized steel tubes painted white so it'll blend into the building. It's already been pre-approved by preservation consultant that it will fit in with the character of the home. And this shows you a kind of a front view of it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or any questions? With that in mind, the chair will entertain a motion that we allow the change in scope for the Wistariahurst restoration damaged porch structure project as presented by our chair of CPA.
A second.
On that motion, roll call because we're hybrid. We welcome Councilor Jordan. Councilor Jordan.
Yes.
Councilor Puello.
Yes.
Councilor Tallman.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. It's a an adopted recommendation to the full city council, 5-0. Megan, thank you. Well presented and as always, concise and to the point. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Motion to take item number 2 off the table for
Motion made and
discussion.
seconded to take item 2 off the table for discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. This is an order that was originally filed by Councilor Puello and Councilor MALDONADO VELEZ, that the police department please provide a list with events and dollar amounts that have received police details paid overtime during the last 6 months. Private businesses, popular leadership making profit should not have their OT dollars paid by tax dollars with public community events have had to budget their own funds in the past. Under discussion, Chief of Police Pratt is here. Chief, are you going to address this one? We kind of got this for an update, and if there's any anything to provide yet to the council, but if you want to come in? If you come in, we can do what you're requesting to keep you out of trouble with that birthday girl.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, well, the request, well, the maker of the orders, if you guys want to just summarize your request and what you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Chief, for providing the information. So we kind of talked a little bit about it at the last meeting, and I mean, it's good to see the breakdown. You know, my particular concern is with the block party. I think the date on here, it says is 10/14. Could you just talk a little bit about that block party, Chief? And I mean, what's going on there? Because like my order says, I mean, the concern is this a private business, right? Fiesta Cafe getting a private event of theirs where they're making money and doing their thing, and are we paying for their detail with tax dollars when other businesses don't?
Right, so after the last meeting, yeah, I got the list together for you in the different events. As far as that specific event, the city issued a permit to close the street. So for the police department, we had an event going on now. We didn't really have a lot of notice, and for us, that particular event, to cover that, there was no way we could do it with a private detail. We just wouldn't have got the officers to work it. So we did it out of here. This is what we do when these things pop up. As you can see, there's multiple ones. Obviously, the biggest one is like the Spanish Fest. It's huge. It's like a 4-day event. But we have other events that come up during the year that require our police presence. If it can't be done through outside detail, it's usually done through this line item.
How many officers was it?
I want to say that it was a long day. It was like a 12 to 10 or something like that hours, like 10 hours maybe. So it was multiple officers breaking it up. I want to say it, I don't know the exact number. I could get it for you though, but it wasn't like all officers worked the entire thing the whole day. It was broken up into different shifts in order to cover it. You know, probably some of the guys that worked 4 to 12 came in early and handled the early part, and then the officers on days stayed and worked the later part. So that's probably how we did it.
When you say you can't, like we can't, it has to be done this way, is there a different rate that we're paying people if it's, like, is there a different rate? Why can't we?
It can be a different rate depending on who the officers are that work it.
But this event, when you say we can't do it that way where they get billed like a traditional vendor, why not? Like, what's the difference? Like, if the rate's the same, if everything's the same, like.
What's
You know
the
what I mean?
difference? I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, like why can't you do the traditional vendor process with this? Like, I don't understand that part.
Well, it's a detail, it goes out over a detail. There's, you know, you put it out over an app and guys sign up. If that doesn't happen, then we go to overtime. Normally, an operation like this, it's a bigger event. It's not just, I need an officer on this corner, that's it. It's an event that needs to be somewhat planned for the police officers, different times coming and going. I usually, in this case, the captain was in charge of it, so I bring in a captain or a supervisor to run it. Sometimes that's all we can get to work it are supervisors, and that will certainly be at a higher rate.
Yeah.
Supervisor.
And I appreciate you putting all this information, Chief. So here's what I'll say. I'm not happy with the way that this thing went down, right? And I'll tell you this. So this event, it was the block party. There was no touch a truck. So why does this say touch a truck on here? Why did we combine those
No,
events?
all that is on this list, this is from payroll. Those dates you see on the side aren't
Yep.
the date of the events, that's the payroll date. So those just came out of the same payroll
Okay.
date.
So we're not
You know what I'm
saying that
saying?
this
Those
block
aren't the
party-
same
okay.
event, no. Those are, there's a few lines like that, I think, you'll see one says Boston Parade and Main Street, like, those just came Walk for Holyoke Car Show. Those were during that same 2-week time frame
Got
that
it.
came out of payroll.
Okay, yeah, because I was concerned. I was like, "Whoa, are we trying to say this was on because the 14 with it was the events Holyoke, the doors open thing, I think that OPED puts together." So I was like, "Whoa, I hope we're not trying to say that's what this was because it's not." But so from what I heard, it was 6 officers that worked the detail, which is kind of a lot. And I talked to some abutters that were there. I don't know if the Ward 1 counselor has anything that she wants to add, but I know that somebody spoke to her about it. And I think there was some cars that were towed. I mean, that event was a nightmare for some of the people down there. So I just think, you know, it's just crazy. Like when we have past events, for example, in Ward 2, right, like the Taste of South Holyoke, and these committees have to budget for the police details that they get. Why are private businesses that are cool with some people around here getting taken care of? I mean, I just don't think that's fair. And I know that order doesn't address this, but I appreciate the numbers, and I know that has nothing to do with you. There's a chain of command around here, I get it. And, you know, I'll file a separate order I mean, I think they should be billed, and then the council can vote on that, receive, adopt, send it. If we don't want to, that's fine, but, you know, I think that's the way that I'm gonna follow up with this. But if nobody else has anything, Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with this being complied with.
Is there any further discussion?
I have questions.
Counselor Dre?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
So, my, I don't know, did Jenny, did you want to speak, or? Okay. My questions somebody go? One of the other co-sponsors, I'll defer. Jose Maldonado Velez had his hand up first.
Counselor Maldonado Velez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this was an order that Councilor Puello put in, and I signed on because there's a similar, well, not a similar order, but there is another order that I had put in about a month ago that is currently in DGR. And that order specifically is asking about what is the process for events around licensing, around permitting, and what are sort of the responsibilities of the departments and how the organizers are able to access those services. And it just felt like this was perfect along those lines with that, because I do have a question as far as, I guess my question is, like, how does the police department determine, like, when is the organizer of the event expected to pay for the detail, or when is the city
That's
going to
my
be
question.
paying for that detail? I think Chief Pratt sort of answered it, but I think it's still just not very clear, especially for those people that are organizing, and also just being very clear as to when we have a big event, how many police officers are we expected that the city's going to provide? You know, the way I see it is that these big events, private, non-for-profit, for the Holyoke, it's whenever police details is being provided, the Holyoke is sort of a co-sponsor, which is great. It's good to have events in the community and whatnot. What my issue is, like, it's not clear enough for the organizers or for these people that are doing events as to when are we supposed to be paying for details? When is the city going to be paying for details? How is all of that determined to make sure that there's a standard going across and going forward, so that we know, and, you know, different organizers that are creating events, they can put it in their budget and make sure and understand how it's coming out. So for my end, the reason why I signed on to this order is just to get that clarity. You know, at what point is it 50 guests, 100 guests? Is it, if the event is at the park versus the War Memorial or whatever it is? How does the police department really determine and just differentiate as to when the organizers are paying footing their bill, or when is the city footing that bill? So that's the clarity that I really want to get out of this whole conversation.
That's to me.
Yeah.
So from the police department standpoint, it just comes down to public safety, and I just make a determination. If we have detail officers, is it enough? Is it not enough? And then based on the event. I know that more recently, the mayor, he does tend to, when he has notice and we're a little bit more ahead of it, we have met with groups and talked about what their event is. It helps us determine that. I know that in this particular case, the shutdown of the street was granted. I wasn't part of that, so I came in sort of after, and it was happening. We had to make a determination for public safety with the main street closed that I needed officers down there, so we did it.
Thank you. So, I mean, what I'm hearing is like, it's not specific to any sort of specific organization or any group. It's more of like, if there's an event that's popping up and we know that we need more officers, or the police department determines that more officers are needed, then y'all are just putting people in there. I guess that answer, but I think and maybe we'll have the conversation with DGR before the year is over. Just more standardization, you know, so that when people are organizing events, they can now for sure, you know, understand and know where the money is going and what they have to pay out and whatnot. Thank you.
Councilor Jordan.
Yeah. I'm pretty much going where he's going in terms of a policy, because what we don't want the city to be accused of is, if you know somebody, you get free police, and if you don't know somebody, you got to pay, okay? And what I'm wondering here is, what's the criteria? Just your judgment? I mean, God bless you, but it's got to be more of a policy than just, you know, well, I think this one pays and I think this one doesn't pay. There should be some sort of policy that's uniform for everybody, that, okay, the organizers are a nonprofit group. They're not charging. They're not themselves serving alcohol or serving alcohol for a fee. It's got to be a lot of those criteria. Oh, well, they came in last minute, so because I can't get anybody, I'm going to make the taxpayers of Holyoke pay for this event. That's the criteria? You know what I'm saying, Chief? It doesn't seem like there's a...
There is a criteria. The criteria you're talking about is what we use. My criteria after the fact is, did we get officers to work? Did we not? Is
Right.
it still a public safety issue? I still have to address that, obviously, as the chief. And that's what specifically this account is for, to handle special events that pop up that we don't have coverage for, that I then have to use regular patrol to.
Taxpayer funded, though.
Yes.
Okay, but what I guess the whole point is, how do we get to that point where taxpayers are paying for this? Somebody says, hey, I own Joe's Bar and Grill, and I want to close the street in front, and by the way, I'm going to sell booze to everybody, and hey, Chief, you know, I'm a good guy, give me free cops and shut down the street.
They don't come to me. I don't close the streets. That's not.
Yeah, well, they go in for a permit. I don't know. They see the
Yeah.
mayor or whoever, I don't know, or the DPW.
DPW.
You know, hey, you know, shut my street down. You know, how does that work? That's the system that we have? That we shut down the street and I start selling booze out in the street to people and I get free cops? Why aren't I paying for cops? Why do I get free cops? That's a public, you know, civic event. And what's the difference between Kevin's Bar and Grill and Joe Blow's Cafe versus so-and-so? I mean, some of them are obvious, right? The St. Patrick's Day Parade, Fiesta Patronales. Some of these are, you know, we get some of these, they're well organized, well in advance. There's no question it's not for a profit of anybody individually, right?
Well,
who's the official organizer of this event? Can we get all the paperwork and like who made money on this and who did it and why I just want to know the criteria, so when citizens know me, who gets free police, who gets to pay for police. I want to just make sure there's one system of government services here for everybody.
right?
I think the,
Go for it.
the intent of this order is off mark here. I think the.
Thank
it's not
you.
It's gonna be a long night. I think, you know, the chief of police and the Holyoke Police Department doesn't close down the street. DPW closes down the street when a permit is issued. I don't know the process because I haven't been involved with that in years. The chief of police and the Holyoke Police Department is responsible for all streets. You know, they have to make a determination sometimes on short notice that we may need, whether it's traffic control, public safety, or whatever, police officers on an event that is on public streets. It's not on private property. So I think the intent of the order should be directed more at who closes the street and who authorizes the closing of the street and what the policy is there with the permit.
Well, that's an important, I think you're asking good questions that we should go there too, because they DPW, before they agree to close the street, right, Carl, should look, do you have police protection? Do you have all these safeguards in place? You know, is there concerns with the neighborhood? How soon in advance? Has there been planning? You know, either you have to sign off on some sort of security or safety plan in advance of their application. I would like to know just sort of like, what's the process? Maybe we should do, you know, ongoing follow-up. But I think it is relevant to this order because at the end of the day, the question being asked here is who's paying and why? And what is a true public community event? And what are private events or quasi-public events that are people are making money off of, like selling alcohol and other things? So that, you know, I think we should just understand a policy, you know, on all of that. But, you know, again, I'm just in the information gathering stage, so I just want to understand the criteria. So if there's a written policy on street closures, please send it to us. If there's a policy on public versus private and how these events and what is the criteria to get free police, I'd like to know. I think the mayor wants to help us.
Mayor Garcia, welcome.
Excuse me.
Mayor Garcia, welcome.
You're certainly heading down a good direction. These are things that when I first came on board, everything's governed by something, and there was no specific policy except what it reads in the ordinance when it comes to road closures. And that's to the farthest extent that we've gotten.
Okay.
And so we've tried to strengthen internal communication so that we're much more proactive in how we handle requests and making sure that, you know, one of the things I've heard that, you know, one department would know, the other department didn't know, and then you have the Board of Health, people are selling things, but the Board of Health wasn't notified, and
Right.
then all of a sudden Holyoke wasn't friendly, and, you know, all these other concerns start.
Right,
So we
right.
started the Flex Squad meetings at the fire department, where whenever we know of any events, we have organizers go in front of them. But you're right, there isn't any real set measured standard that, to the very all the points you've made. I know Councilor Murphy Ramboletti, I think you introduced, is that your order that went to DGNR? Or I know you had sent an email about policy, and I responded saying, yeah, absolutely agree. We should have rules that help better dictate. I can tell you that there's never been a permit requested from the city that we've ever denied, actually, but instead they look at where it is, what's the safety concern. Here we're talking about Main and Cabot versus another one. I think there's an establishment that likes to close down Spring Street. Small street, out of sight, out of mind, no police officers needed. You get neighborhood block parties. I know my neighborhood, the Pinehurst block party.
Yep.
Small street, out of sight, out of mind. You just need the horses, no police needed.
Right.
Main and Cabot.
Right.
Well, wait a minute, big safety concern. That's the criteria there right now, but nothing, to your point, a policy written, which, like I expressed to the councilor when she first reached out about this too, this very concern, said absolutely, we can come up with the rules to better
Okay.
control it and manage it. And then that way, if, you know, it'll give me a reason to deny somebody, or it's not even me, the DPW is who gets the road closure requests, and then from there, it should be going to police and other departments to mitigate what the needs are for that day. But no permit's never been denied for any group, certainly not because I personally know anybody or somebody, but somebody has an idea that is positive, brings revenue into the city one way, shape, or form. You know, as supported, and then we look at what the public safety needs are. But yeah, I share that concern too. Like, is it a wise idea? Certainly isn't illegal. I didn't do anything illegal here, but is it a wise idea to use taxpayer money to support what can be perceived as a private event? I agree with that too. So, yeah, if we want to work on an ordinance or policy or something, I welcome it 150%.
Yeah, I think you have control over all of these. I think just a policy, that, so if I want to have an event for a street closure, you have to announce the event 4 weeks in advance, and
You have to let the butters know.
or whatever that
Yep.
time frame you feel is reasonable, and then, part of the application is who is it? Is it a not-profit? Is it for-profit? Is it, these type of criteria? And then, the DPW could say, all right, what is the safety plan? Has this been approved by the police chief or the fire chief and, Board of Health if they're serving food or whatever the case may be? Because, if somebody goes and shuts the street down, has a block party, and they make 15 grand in alcohol sales, well then, they can go pay $3 grand for the cops for the night or whatever it is, Whereas if you're the St. Patrick's Parade or your Fiesta Patronales and you're doing this basically for nothing as a community thing and they're not making any money by doing this, these are the type of things that we want to encourage, these type of cultural engagement events.
Yeah.
So in those cases, we do support them with tax money. So I think not every event, and I think you'd agree, is safety-wise the same, monetarily is the same. So I would hope someone is screening all of those applications and weighing each of these to say, because, money's money. And, I don't know this Touch a Truck and Block Party got roped into the same thing, but whatever it was, between the two of them, it was $4,500. So I don't know if each was.
Related.
They're not related, yeah, nothing to do with each other. But if one was $2,500 and the other was $2,000, but still, $2,500 of tax money, why should somebody get that if they made, $8,000 or, on it? I have no idea. I have no particular knowledge. I do know that the street was closed and, should abutters be notified if someone asks for a street closure in front of your house? I kind of think so, right? I mean, what's the due? Because
That's been the rule.
Oh, has it?
That's been the unwritten rule is abutters should know. I think
Right.
in this particular scenario, and the same thing happened with the Maple Street closure, it was within that 2-week period. We have a particular DPW supervisor that's new, didn't know about our Flex Squad meetings, and he was just and he was approving them, didn't forward it to the police. But Carl and I sat down, we've talked about it and fixed it. But to your point, I'm wondering if we can get a committee together maybe perhaps
Yeah.
to help kind of come up with some good best practices or something.
Yeah, that would, maybe we can, if there's something in another town somewhere, maybe we can pirate something that somebody else is doing too, and it sounds like the committee's already working on some things. Thank you, Mayor, appreciate your help.
No problem.
Councilor Maldonado Velez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with you in that this conversation may not be actually in this order. I mean, the order itself really was just asking for a copy of the numbers and the amount that are being used for different events. And I think that part of it was fulfilled. I think the conversation needs to be had in DGR, or at least with the other order that I put in at the beginning of October, that really asks that all the boards, licensing board, Board of Health, Fire Department, Police Department, DPW, which I know are all part of the Flex Squad in these monthly meetings. But again, even in this past 2 years, as things are getting tighter and more stricter, there's still also been moments of this month, there's this policy for outdoor vendors, and then 2-3 months later, maybe a slightly different policy. So just even though the law has been stayed the same, the interpretation has shifted a little throughout the last 2 years. So the purpose of why I wrote the other order is to have that, the mayor just said it, having some sort of committee or something to make sure that this is all cleared out, because as the city gets bigger, as even not just bigger, as people realize that there's different events that can be done and something you can do on your own, even a block party in your own neighborhood. These are the sort of things that people need to know, like what permits are needed, when are they needed, what needs to get paid, and that's the purpose for the other order. So I agree that I'll stop there because the conversation should be held in that meeting and under that order, but just wanted to give that feedback. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Jenny Rivera.
So I was there. One, I didn't see any alcohol being served outside. One does have a liquor license, and the alcohol was inside. You needed to have a ban in order to get in. I don't know who went back and told you that they spoke to me. That was a lie. Because my cousin came and told me, hey, Jenny, they're talking about towing cars. I went inside RaySmart and asked what was the problem. And the problem was people were parking at the pumps and not putting gas. And again, it comes down to, I would know because I know my ward, but when the police department has approached RaySmart did not want their section closed at all other times. So it gave the advantage to these people just to go and hang out at RaySmart because they were okay with it before. I went individual to every single car and I said, hey, if you're not pumping gas, can you move? No issues. Everybody's like, oh, no problem. And they moved. There was no issues there. And Juan is not being favored by the mayor. He's not being favored by the cops. He did what he went to do. He got his permit. If nothing was put in place, there wasn't a policy, that's not on him. That comes back to who? City councilors.
Why? Why us? We don't make.
Because then that should,
Councilor
I'm speaking now, because if there was a policy, then it should have been in effect before even we became councilors. Because I'm hearing a lot of the things that I hear while in these last 2 years, like, well, this and that and this and that. Well, why wasn't that done before we came in here? So that shouldn't be on us. So if Juan went and did what he was supposed to do, get a permit, he was granted the permit. If there's not a policy, he's got a loudspeaker permit, and it was a DJ he brought in, a very popular DJ. And after the event, people got out, the streets were clean, and everything was fine. The cops were there, they did their job, and like Chief Pratt did say, there was not one sane police officer the whole entire day. So, that's all I gotta say.
Any further discussion? Councilor Drain.
Just briefly, I think the point is, one of the things that I've heard, Councilor Rivera, is that we don't need to have an ordinance on every little thing on how they use their discretion. See, they have the authority on issuing these permits. What I'm suggesting is, and again, it comes back to the micromanagement level, is we have resisted having an ordinance on every little discretionary thing that they do. And what I'm suggesting is, now that they have this discretion, because they're running the places day to day, is they should have a policy that they make up, okay, and that's reasonable, of course, but that's why I'm saying it isn't the city council, and that's the only reason I'm taking a little minor exception to what you're saying, is it isn't the city council tells them how to use their discretion on who gets a permit, why, who gets free police, who pays for their police, all that. What I'm suggesting is draft a policy and just stick with it, whatever that policy is going to be. And then what I'm just suggesting, though, is in the absence of a policy, we don't have direction to the citizens as to who gets what the process is, who do I see, and I'm just saying, I think we're kind of counting on them to make a policy as opposed to, we could draft an ordinance and set it all up, I suppose, but I think it might be best in this instance to have them make a policy. That's all I'm suggesting.
Okay, but that's fine how you're saying it now, because both your conversations started as, oh, if this one knows this one gets this one gets granted that, so.
Well, you're right.
That's how it started, so maybe
okay,
now
let me
it was
finish it the same way.
corrected. Now it was corrected.
Okay. All right, so what I want to finish I'll finish with that same point because you're right. That is how I started, and that's how I'll finish it. The point is, in the absence of a policy, it looks very arbitrary, okay? If there's no uniformity or one set of rules for everyone, one can easily argue, well, I didn't get it, he got it, or she got it, but this one and this one didn't get it, okay? So
Has that been done?
I don't know. I haven't
Okay,
done an
thank you.
exhaustive
So
research.
like they said, this was not part
But
of the
Holyoke-
agenda and the question, so then
Okay.
let's just move forward.
Understood. Well, we got to move forward,
Okay,
but we
yeah,
also
let's
need.
move forward.
Okay, great. We can move forward after I'm done talking about the history. He's only been mayor for 2 years. Have you done a 20-year exhaustive review of every permit that's come in to request?
Have
I
you?
mean, no, I haven't.
Have you? Okay.
Okay, so the point
All right.
is,
I don't mind a
Has it been done?
roundtable discussion,
But-
but
but
let's not go
the
back.
point
Okay,
is
let's just,
to
let's just
suggest
continue with
that-
what's on the agenda, and like Jose said,
and we wanna
that's
know where the
what's
money was
gonna be
spent.
discussed here. We could take it to DGR, which I am part of the committee,
Mm-hmm.
and we could discuss it there further.
yeah, well, the point again is, in the absence of a policy, it becomes just completely arbitrary as to what.
Well, let's get a
people's
policy for
decision-
everybody. Let's get a policy for everybody.
That's where I started, and
Okay.
I guess we're in
But
agreement.
don't accuse people. Because you're sitting here
We
accusing
have
them.
27 department heads waiting to speak to us on a
You just made that up.
supplemental
Okay,
budget.
like
yeah,
usual.
okay,
Let's
like usual,
stop
yeah.
the one-on-one conversation and let's have a good conversation here. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you. A lot of the points that I wanted to address have been covered in a lot of the conversations that,
Everything's been covered. We need a policy.
in a sense, yeah. So I agree with the policy. I think the one piece that haven't been covered is what is the budget? Like,
Well-
what is the budget? Is it unlimited? Like what is the cap? Like, when do we stop spending the money? Because it doesn't sound like someone said that yet.
Are you talking about
Like,
the special events line item?
Yeah. And where does the money come from? Does it come from police? Does it come from? So then it comes from the police budget.
So Chief, what's the dollar amount for the special line item?
It was, I think it was
40,000.
45,000.
Yeah.
45,000 to start the year.
And so, Counselor, just to quickly answer the question, so the line item is there in the police department budget, special events, and what we tried to do when we determined what that number would be was we took into account the events we know are going to happen every year. And then we took into account the in-between, that things I've heard about that might happen, and if whether or not there's a, I think the Miranda basketball tournaments, for example.
Yeah.
Like, hey, that happens every year. He always wants an officer there. He asks for the city to, so we try to take all of that into account with a little bit of flexibility just in case there's some other events we're not aware of, something new pops up.
So
we monitor it.
in that, right, like, I just know in personal experience, like, in that specific tournament, the concern sometimes is, can they cover the fee of paying for police? Most of the time, the city ends up covering the fee, but he still goes through the stress of thinking of having to raise the money to cover police in case the city doesn't cover the police. So it's not always guaranteed that he gets that cover. So a policy would help. Again, I don't want to go back to talking to that, but I think to me the overall question that I have is, like, what's the cap? Like, when does it end?
So he meets, we come like a month in advance, we'll meet, we'll go over what he needs, and then I'll say, yes, this is what you know what I mean? And so just so that he doesn't stress whether or not he has to get his own detail work.
Because right there, there's like a large, not to say it's a large number, because
It
all
just-
the events make sense.
It gets
but it's just like,
we look at it and we say, okay, what can we do? What can't we do? Okay, there's X amount right now, but we still have the Pride event that happens in June.
Right.
That we want to make sure
St.
it's in there.
Patrick's Day parade.
Things that we've already knew that's coming. The 4th of July thing is always weird because June, if it rains, and it's July's, the next fiscal year's budget. So basically, Counselor, we monitor it as we go. And let's say all of a sudden 10 events happen at, obviously at that point we'll be closing that loop, but that goes to Counselor Jordane's point is, why yes to these guys, but not these, you know what I mean? So at some point, there has to be some sort of standard we can measure to say, so we can not say yes to everybody, and then we can control it a little better so that we're not spending or making, unwise decisions.
No,
about reallocating.
I hear that, and all that makes sense. I think for me, it's just
But we haven't just gotten there yet.
that larger number, right? Like right now, it just so happens that we have a certain amount of events. But let's say somebody else comes in and they want to organize a huge or larger event that might impact the budget. What's going to stop you to say, like, no, we can't? And I'm not saying that I want you to do that. I'm just saying, like, what is the cap? Because right now, it seems like there is no cap. It's just a discretion based on whether or not you guys believe an event it should take place or not. Not should take place, but if it needs the support or not. So at the end of the day, in my job, I have an events budget, right? I have like $2,000 or $3,000. That's what I can spend for the year. So to me, it's thinking fiscally, what is that number for you guys? Because I kind of haven't seen that number.
We haven't gotten there yet. So it's been monitored.
So it's as we
We've
go.
been able to take care of everyone's needs accordingly, but there will be a point eventually that can potentially happen. And a lot of the concerns that I've heard tonight, which I think are very well received concerns, I share them too. Going back to what's concluded here is that, yeah, we should have a stronger policy that helps better manage it so that we're not hitting that breaking point. And again, you have to budget for it. So as the city continues to grow and things get more and more popular, then when we're putting our budget together for the next fiscal year, we're putting to you a guess of what we think we're going to need to cover those events throughout the year that are supported by whatever policy that we create. So it's just, again, we have to monitor it, keep our finger on the pulse to be sure that we're not breaking the line item there.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of great conversation going on here, and I'm happy that this order was filed, but I'm concerned about the fashion or the reasoning behind the order. It seems a bit targeted, and I feel the need to say that because this city is over 150 years old. It's not the first time we've had, events. We've had tons and tons and tons of events. And I feel that this order was targeted specifically for just one specific event when I can go over a ton of events that have happened. Now, we don't need to go back and forth. As an elected official, I just want to point that out because if we're gonna be doing work for the city, then let's be honest and open about why we're doing it and not being targeting one over the other, because it's not right and it's disturbing to say the least. Thank you. Move forward.
Is there any further discussion?
I'll be quick.
Councilor Puello.
I'll be real quick, Joe. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just quick clarifying remarks that, I made it pretty clear that my initial concern was with this one business, right? We have this list, and it's the only private business on the list. So, I made that pretty clear that was my concern. And then just to clarify other things too, because I don't want things to be left out in the open. The race smart, and it's good that we had the conversation about abutters being more involved in the process. I think that would fix the concerns and that would fix everything. The race smart was disappointed. From what I heard, I think there was like 4 or 5 cars that were towed. I know that night there was a loud noise complaint that was issued. The event, some people weren't too happy. And I think there's a shelter too. There's a shelter with people that live right next to this building. So there's a number of people that weren't happy, and then that's why they reached out to me. But I think all the discussion's been good, and I think that the solutions that have been talked about would work. Thank you.
Motion's been complied with?
Second.
Motion made and seconded that this order has been complied with. If there's no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll. Chair will call the roll. Councilor Jordan.
Yes.
Councilor Puello.
Yes.
Councilor Thomas.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. All right, the order is complied with. We received the what was asked for. Healthy discussion, a little bit longer than I anticipated, but that's okay. I'm not upset. And with that, this will go back to the full city council. I'm sure there'll be some further discussion, as the mayor so eloquently pointed out.
Mr.
Chair,
Chairman, may we
would-
go out of order to take up item number 5, please? That's the chief is still here.
The chair would make a suggestion, and that would be we take up items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. They're all related to the supplemental budget.
Okay.
Yeah, motion we go out of order, take up item 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 as a
Since 3,
package.
4, 5, 6, and 7 are next, are we really going
Oh,
on?
well, yeah, we're not going out of
No,
order.
I guess we're
No,
not.
I'm not out of order, but take up as a package.
As a package,
Package.
yeah, so moved.
For the purpose of discussion, I'll explain real quick.
Okay.
On that motion, all those in favor,
Aye.
any opposed? For everybody listening, item 3 is introduced by the mayor. It's Mayor Garcia's supplemental budget for fiscal 2024. Item 4 is a executive summary for the supplemental budget provided by Mayor Garcia. Also, item 5 provided by Mayor Garcia is the proposal for Ezekiel's plan known as Operation Safe Streets. We also have one contract, but 2 items from the city solicitor with an agreement negotiated by the law department for the mayor with local union number 1693. And I believe item 7 is, I believe 1 is the contract and 1 is the MOU for the most latest. The reason 6 and 7 are part of this discussion is they are, the funding, which is our purview, is part of the supplemental budget. So just let me say real quick, and Chief Pratt, stay where you are for a minute, please. We have a supplemental budget before us. It's not unusual this time of year to have a supplemental budget, but this is a supplemental budget that has close to 44 votes in it. Those votes will be taken by the City Council next Tuesday when the President of the City Council will have a line item review of this budget. The purpose of tonight's hearing is similar to a budget hearing, whereas through our administrative assistant, we asked the mayor to have all departments that have an addition or a reduction in their budget to be present this evening to answer questions. So it makes sense to just do a review of this. We're going to go with the police department first because we just put the chief through the hot seat for a moment, and we're just going to do that in 2 seconds. But Mayor Garcia, tonight is about funding. Certainly, we all commend you and understand the purpose of Ezekiel's plan, and we certainly want to get into that. And we certainly understand our firefighters who are here and are looking for a well-deserved new contract. And all that in time will go as quickly as we possibly can, but we want to set this up so there won't be that many questions next Tuesday at the full City Council meeting. There are a lot of questions, not just about line items. The funding for a lot of what we see, operational, city budget-wise, there's also alternative funding, ARPA, which we need to have a really good discussion on, because when ARPA is used for recovery purposes, that is one thing. When it's used to increase personnel and increase the budget, it has long-term effects. And we don't vote on ARPA, but we do, I think you need to understand, and we appreciate you putting that in front of us. Mayor, did you want to make any opening comments, and then before we get into the chief's purpose for being here?
Are we talking about ARPA, or are we talking about the supplemental?
Well, we're talking about the supplemental budget.
Okay.
Primarily. There is a line item for Ezekiel's plan in the supplemental budget. Now, I understand the $1 million is coming from ARPA.
Yep. Well, yes, I can explain.
Okay.
All right. So in this supplemental budget, just to set the table.
We're on page 27, which is part of the police department supplemental budget too.
So just to set the table a little bit in the grand scheme of the overall budget, we are, this whole supplemental is part of an exercise to help us hit what's our target, which is constantly moving. So in this supplemental, you have pluses and minuses throughout, which we're going to go over tonight. There's a proposal of an additional $2,171,406 to operate in FY24, 1.5 million to cover the sewer deficit for 23 and 24. And then there's, considering this, it leaves on the table, there is a small, depending who you ask, roughly $303,000 of surplus to the levy limit. The biggest contributor To the supplemental, we have the fire local union contract, an increase of $723,005, which I believe is in front of you and you'll go over. And then there's also the combined total of $1,557 to cover the deficit. As far as Ezekiel's plan is concerned, just so you're aware, today is my second anniversary as mayor since being inaugurated 2 years ago, and obviously it's truly been a roller coaster of emotions. The encounters and experiences of any single day it has been a combination of affirming and humbling and sorrowing and sometimes very frustrating. But there hasn't been any single day, however, that's bothered me more than that day we lost a Holyoker through acts of violence, and he wasn't even born yet. So we're an extremely compassionate city. That commitment to compassion and social justice has to be balanced against our responsibility to provide the safety and well-being for all of our citizens in every corner of our city. And as mayor, I have an obligation to address issues that are related to violence and illegal activity and health and safety disparities that have a negative impact on our neighborhoods. And the challenge that we're often facing, and I'm preaching to the choir here, local government standpoint, is our inability to adequately fund departments to maintain and enhance the services that the community expects, so that we're proactive and moving away from our reactionary standpoint that we're in. I can say that these departments, they do their best with what we have, and I'd argue that we do it better than any other community with actual means. We've been creative with limited resources, relied on cross-departmental collaboration and sharing resources, strengthening partnerships involving state, local, and federal departments and institutions. Our city and community partners, all our community partners, have adopted all sorts of non-traditional methods and best practices to serve the public, but the number and the magnitude of the issues just simply doesn't allow us to do more than scratch the surface. And we're talking about countrywide problems plaguing vulnerable communities. And when I say vulnerable, the median household income downtown in our 4 census tracts is less than $17,000 a year. And with that level of poverty, you can imagine the series of quality of life challenges residents downtown are facing every single day. But I think we can all agree that regardless of the economic situation anywhere, no matter what corner you live in, every resident should never feel like they're not safe, or, and this is one that I hear often and it bothers me, that their government doesn't care about their safety. We've heard from downtown businesses in this very room express concern about violence and drug problems downtown. I've heard from residents questioning if their local government cares about their safety or even what's going on our streets. The most recent tragedy of the death of an unborn child while his mother was riding a bus has alarmed and frustrated the community even more than the series of concerns that were piling up even prior to. They demand that their local government do more to curb the rising tide of violence in Holyoke. I think that this plan helps us do exactly that, and not just through one set of lens. This plan will help me launch a comprehensive approach that is really a combination of a lot of things that I've heard from many people and previous studies on what we need to do to combat issues. So my approach focuses on several key factors: proactive police enforcement instead of just being reactionary, additional officers, enhanced surveillance, increased inspection capacity, engaging in community response efforts, implementing tenant and neighborhood protection strategies, and strengthening efforts for neighborhood outreach and engagement. The funding sources identified are diverse. The strategies and funding sources that are in front of you outlined in detail and are included in the supplemental budget. Now, I know that we're not going to be able to solve the problems of the country or the world. We're talking about access to guns and smuggling of drugs, lack of housing opportunities, mental health issues, lack of jobs, and more health outcomes and health factors. These are not issues that any one local government can resolve on their own, and although I do not think we can eliminate these problems, we can certainly do what we can to prevent them from happening and improving conditions. And it will also, I think, more importantly here, reassure the public that we do care about their safety, that their local government is doing everything in their power to improve outcomes in their neighborhood, to shake away the perspective that we're not. So I'm looking forward to a healthy discussion regarding these plans. I think that there's very important points that I know are going to come up. One that you just mentioned yourself, Mr. Chairman, of some points in the plan, how we're going to sustain it every other year thereafter. So looking forward to the conversation, and thank you so much for, I mean, not just this, for your attention on this, but for anything that I bring forward to you, and the attention and the guidance that you bring to help navigate the challenges in the community. So,
Mayor, our attention, and you, not only do you deserve our attention, the police department, the entire community deserves attention on this. I think Ezekiel's plan, as not just as you outlined it, as it's been presented to us, has been well thought out. It's police work. It's a vision for additional, and as you own words, proactive police presence to address some ongoing issues when it comes to the criminal element within the city of Holyoke. And with all that said, the purpose of tonight, though, is about funding. And the funding, you proposed a $14 million last June police department budget, which the city council granted to you, outright. So is, on page 27, the auditor has given an object code and a line item for $1 million called Ezekiel's plan. But other than not the why, but how is that going to play into the police department budget? And let me be a little bit more specific, because it's I think the proposal, I understand it. I think it's something that certainly will work, something that is needed. Actually, I've already seen it working because of where I work, where my career is, and the arrests have been tremendous. The arrests have been real arrests. Not just what happened 10 years ago with a different chief of police. They're legitimate arrests, and people who have warrants are getting picked up, and it's working in that respect. But if any of this $1 million, and this is where I want to be a little bit specific, is used to hire additional police officers, we have a cap by city ordinance on how many patrol officers there are. Two, the mayor and city council, but the mayor first decides how many of those police patrol officers he's going to fund in any given year. And that's important because, one, you can't go over the cap. Mm-hmm. But two is, and we learned this from the city of Springfield probably 2 decades ago, where they used outside alternative revenue sources and hired like 80 police officers or something in that nature. And when the outside alternative revenue dried up, they had to lay those police officers off, and you put them in bankruptcy. And then the reason being is, like Springfield, Holyoke is self-insured for unemployment. So if you have to lay off a person in any department, you have to lay off a half of another person to pay for the unemployment. Right. So if you hire 13 officers, I'm not saying this will happen, and you lose the funding for 13 officers and they go to collect unemployment, we now lose 19 officers. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm painting the worst case scenario. How is this line item on 27 going to be used, and how do we know, from the funding point of view, the checks and balances, where this $1 million is going to be used? And it's not just about salaries, but if overtime is one thing. Overtime is used and done. But if you create a position, it's salaries, it's benefits, including retirement, and it's an impact on a lot of parts moving in the budget itself, health insurance and so forth.
Yep. So we kept that $1 million line item separate from any of the departments, actually, because, what we funded there, in this case, we're talking about police. We have our police department budget, and we have this, which kind of seems like treating it as a form of a grant so that we can track it, monitor it, and not get confused by putting it into our normal department numbers. So when we're planning for the next budget, those are clearly separated. It doesn't give you a perceived illusion that we've, raised and appropriated and all of a sudden we have a $1 million, I'm just using a number here, $1 million difference in the police department. So we said, all right, let's keep them separate so that we can manage it that way. What we fund in our police department right now is all reactionary. So, I spent a lot of time really trying to untangle and understand what's going on that we're not able to, from the outside looking in, there's some very good, what would sound like common sense questions about what we think might be going on in the police department and how come we're not seeing this and all this money we spend that. And what I've learned to date through the various things we've done, from the audit to going line by line, working with the police department, trying to understand, and uncover some of these things, is that what we're paying for is coverage. It's reactionary services. So yeah, when you see that police cruiser traveling down High Street and don't pull over or doesn't stop someone from illegal parking or maybe doesn't attend that person that might be actively using in broad daylight, it's because that cop is on his way probably to a call. We don't fund enough for traffic patrol. We don't fund enough for walking the beat, for riding bikes. When you do see that, it's because it's detail work. It's because we found a surplus in the budget, or the most recent action you've seen. It just so happened that we had just probably about a month or two maybe have gotten a million, was it, not a million, but a grant to do.
It was a grant from the state. It was a reimbursable grant from EOPS to work collectively with the state police.
So a lot of what you've been seeing lately was already in the plan, in the works, and it coincidentally this all happened and went down, and we kind of absorbed it and called it Safe Streets Initiative. But the community policing, the stuff that people want to see, that proactive, that's detail work. So that means we have to find officers that are not working a normal shift to work a weekend and do what people want. And then we had a police audit that said that we're severely understaffed and under-resourced, and had recommendations of where we should be and how much we can hire to, considering that where we should be is not feasible, how much more we can include to get us there, to help give us some sort of flexibility to do some proactive policing work. We don't have our own internal dedicated team focused on tackling issues around crime. We don't have like a specialized task force internally in our city, and this plan helps get one off the ground to tackle some issues in some of the blocks here. So to your point about adding you're absolutely right. How are we going to sustain it? And that's something we'll have to figure out. But I guess the exercise here is we want to see the very things that people have mentioned, that I've brought up. We want to see community policing. We'd love to see more bike patrol. We would, that this is what's going to launch that and get us there a little bit, as far as adding the 13 new officers. Now you take that out of the equation, you have the $488,000. That's the overtime expenses for Safe Streets. That's all detail work right there to get the cops doing the work that we need to, for a 12-month long period, not just one day, a month, or whatever the case, to be more proactive, be more visible in a positive way as far as community policing is concerned, as well as get that specialized task force. Holyoke's we're not geographically dispersed. We're not a complicated city. Our issues are condensed. And the thought here, when I was working with our chief, is to get me a number that's going to help us tackle those spots that we know have been a problem, and do what we need to do to be more proactive and address. Now, I'm very mindful that I don't think anything in this plan is going to help us eliminate the problems happening in this city because there's societal, excuse me, issues. But at least I think it gives it's going to help us prevent some things from going on, and also is going to offer that peace of mind that the community knows that we're taking these issues seriously. And it's not just policing here, Counselor. I've heard ideas around tenant protections. I've heard, thank you, about best practices in other communities as far as community response is concerned. So, you know, we've identified our homeless liaison, which we've talked about before, talked about public landlord registry, or doing inspections in units, holding landlords accountable to a standard of the law of how conditions should be, bringing on legal counsel, outsourced for residents that need some legal advice on issues. So it's various, you know, building up our inspectional needs in the Board of Health and supporting other cross-department initiatives like the Flex Squad work. It's those proactive things that, you know, addressing blight, whatever that issues that might be going on that eventually lead toward criminal or violent behavior. So it's multifaceted. It takes into consideration a lot of what I've been hearing about, and I think it's going to help us launch the strategies that we want to get off the ground. But I think out of all of these, and the chief and I have talked about this, we knew this was going to be a sticking point coming in here. The challenge is going to be, all right, those, if we do successfully get on board those 13 new officers, you know, how are we going to sustain it? But I can tell you that those 13 new officers, you know, when I hear from time to time and I see the order come across my desk, or when I observe the discussions happening here, you know, about the why isn't, why not, why can't the police, that's why the department is, I know $14 million sounds like a lot of money to an individual looking in, but in the grand scheme of it, and you compare it to the quality of life issues we have happening in Holyoke, which is nowhere near compared to any other surrounding community, you know, you start to see why we have the issues that we have and start to understand it more. Yeah, as to your point about after year one, what about year 2, year 3? How do we sustain the 13 new officers? Can there be layoffs potentially, depending on where we are with the budget, and if whether or not we can balance it to the and not exceed our levy limit, or even consider the idea of Prop 2.5? Those are things that you know, we should be concerned about. Absolutely.
Chief, did you want to add anything?
You know, I would just, one very important statistic that really backs up what the mayor's saying here is, and I just received these recently, is our PSAP numbers, which is basically our 911 calls. The city of Holyoke does about 29,000 911 calls. Those aren't non-emergency calls, those are just emergency calls. To help put that in perspective, 2 surrounding communities to us, West Springfield and Westfield, combined do about 32,000. We do 29,000 here. Those 2 departments combined probably have 150 officers. They handle those calls. And what I would say is, and I'm just bringing home the point the mayor's making, we're very reactionary here, handling a lot of calls, a lot of emergency calls, more so than our surrounding communities, with less officers. So that's where I was going with the plan when the mayor asked me to, what can we do? What can we do? Well, sure, short-term stuff, yeah, we can get some money and we can do some operations and we can make an impact, but long-term, you're just putting a Band-Aid on it. Long-term, this is the answer. And so how we get there, this is, you know, why we're here, right, to talk about it. So those numbers really, even, to be honest with you, were even a little eye-opening to me. There's a thing called Westcom, which is multiple departments. So I think there's 5 departments that go through Westcom for their 911 calls. They combined have 45,000 calls. So that's really important information to understand what the Holyoke Police Department is dealing with. And I can assure you that the calls we're dealing with here are much different than the calls they're dealing with in Westfield or West Springfield. So I just that all factors into our decision here to, in our discussions with the mayor and why we came up with that number. So that's all I got.
13 new police officers, is this above and beyond what's been budgeted, which I believe you told us the other evening, looked like we're getting towards 92, but then you lost a few?
Correct. We're currently at 93 now, but 6 of them are in the police academy, and we won't see them till the spring.
Okay. Now, each of these 13 new officers is in addition to the 93.
Correct.
And they would have to go through the academy, they have to come off the reserve list?
They would just come off the regular
Or
civil service
the
list
civil
now.
service
Yes.
list, okay. What impact, are these all patrol officers? What impact will that have on supervisory staff?
They would be all patrol officers for sure, and I think that our supervisory staff has been set up to handle that many in the past, and I think we would be good with there.
And on page 18, with the mayor's supplemental budget, you're reducing the lieutenants. I know there's an executive summary, it's in there, by 72,720. Are we eliminating a lieutenant for the future?
Well, the mayor, he's using that money in his supplemental.
I understand that.
No, we're not eliminating the position.
Okay, but see, that's my point.
Right.
All these reductions are gonna, and it's, the reductions would be a transfer a lot of times in the middle of the year. Living within your budget is what we call it. If there's a vacancy, use them, the surplus money someplace where you need it. But we're taking $72,720 out of the budget, and that's gonna create a little bit of a perception problem next year to the next city council, which won't be me.
Well,
And they're gonna have to look at it and say, well, wait a minute, now we're back to 8, and right away, that's gonna inflate the revenue you need.
The position,
That all gets looked at, I'm sorry, Mayor. I think that all gets looked at together. I mean, depending on the increase. I would not obviously be in favor of reducing our supervision if we were increasing our patrol division.
I'm not suggesting, I'm asking.
Yeah. So, no, that's how I would look at it.
Mayor?
yeah, the position's currently vacant, and so we've reduced the line item. And so when we're planning for 25, right, because we're in 24 right now, when we're planning for 25, I mean, those are things that we have to discuss, like whether or not we want to keep that position vacant and not funded, or depending on what our funding situation looks like, maybe we can put it back on. So right now, I can tell you that, it's the number, the cap is there, but it's not budgeted right. If you approve this change, it's not budgeted for 7 lieutenants. And going into the new fiscal year, depending on what our projections look like, and if, putting our budget together, if we can add it, great, we will. If we can't, it'll stay at 6 and not be 7. But that's just to the chief's point. Or it'll stay at the 7 and not the 8, sorry. So that's the chief's point. He's gonna put his budget together and it'll include the 8, but it'll come to me and I'll probably eliminate the funding for that 8th, not necessarily eliminating the position, but the funding for the position. It all depends on where our balancing needs are. That will determine at that time whether or not we'll be funding the 8th lieutenant position.
Is anybody acting out of grade right now as a lieutenant?
Acting out of grade, no.
Okay, so there's
I'm
only
operating
7
with
lieutenants at the moment,
Correct.
and we're not bumping someone up out of grade to fill in as the 8th.
No.
And I don't want to hog this whole conversation here, but we've got Ezekiel's in page 18 and 19. Counselor Jordan, then Counselor Murphy-Ramboletti.
Okay. And going through the Ezekiel, we're just going to stay with the police component of the Ezekiel plan, right, for now?
Yeah, I think Ezekiel connects to 18 and 19, but yeah,
Well,
let's
they've
triangle
got a laundry list of other areas too, obviously, but.
ARPA is not on the table right now, except for Ezekiel, because it's been giving a budget code and it's in the budget,
Yeah.
which I'm guessing we can cut. I'm looking at the auditor, not the mayor.
If it's going into the budget, regardless
That's
if it's sourced.
the issue.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But still is subject to appropriation from us then, right? Yep.
Right.
Okay. So I want to just understand about the 13 officers, and I think Joe presents this as well, let's just back up. Historically, many years, we've always avoided hiring officers off of grant funding for obvious reasons, right? When the grant dries up, the funding dries up, right? And now you're in a situation where you're in a potential layoff situation. So when this says 256 for 13 officers, this is obviously not the true cost of the officers. The officers actually, is that for just this fiscal year?
That's correct.
Okay,
That would be to hire them to go to the academy for this fiscal year.
right. Well, what's it actually cost for 13 officers come July 1st for the next year? It's going to be a lot, right?
Yeah,
They're about
I don't
60
have the number on the top of
Okay,
my head. I'd
well-
probably say,
You put in the
Rough guess,
budget
I'd probably say probably
6.5.
about-
Yeah, go ahead.
700, probably. I would think going forward, 800 maybe.
I think more than that.
Guessing. I'm not using a calculator.
Yeah, I got one of these handy here. So basically, we're saying here we had 92 officers, correct now? Or did we agree to 95 in your opinion?
95 is what we're.
Okay, 95. Okay. So if we take 6.5 million divided by 95, that's 6842 times 12, back up, times 13. That's 900,000. And now that doesn't include, that's just salary, right? That doesn't include all the other benefits and all the other stuff that appears in these different line items that they're, allowed to get, right? So my concern is that if that's $1 million, how are we going to sustainably add another $1 million to the police department budget? Because ARPA, we're almost at the end of ARPA, right? So how is that going to work? How is that sustainable?
Yeah, you're bringing, and actually, this is the very point of my exercise tonight here, is that it really isn't. And oftentimes I hear from people from this body, people from out the public, about police, and how come this, and why aren't they that, and doing their job here and over there. Just know that we can do it, but do we have what it takes to get there? Now, the 488,000 that's going to cover everything else, proactive policing, like to the chief's point that he just made, that 256, that 13 new, let's just say the 13 new officers was to sustain, because we're not going to see those folks until about a year from now.
Right.
It's to sustain the work that we're going to be doing between now and the next year. Because once we've done the work and we've exhausted the funds, we're back to reactionary police department. So, and with no flexibility to do what folks bang on my door and ask me to do, the traffic patrol, the bike patrol. Sorry, it can't happen. It can happen if we have what it takes to do it. But if we don't, and I don't think it's even if we have what it takes, it's a funding limitation issue, to your point. Mm-hmm. It's about another $1 million. Right now, we have access capacity of about 300,000. 2 million of that is ARPA revenue replacement. It's not going to be around next year.
Right.
How are we going to fund an extra million?
Right, because we already have a structural debt. You touch on it right there.
I knew where this was
We already have a
going,
structural
and the whole
deficit of
point
$2
why I'm
million.
bringing it in
Yeah.
front of you, because I need people to understand that this is some complex stuff.
Right.
This ain't no walk in the park.
Exactly.
It's not easy stuff to understand. And when you throw stuff at my office, I get frustrated, take it very personal. You know, because it's bigger than what people think or even imagine or realize.
That's right.
So.
Okay, so I guess I'll rephrase my question again is how can I agree to hire 13 more officers that I have no long-term revenue to actually pay for so that we can taste for $256, but we can't actually buy the meal, if you will, to use that analogy, right? I can, $256, that's nothing. I mean, this is going to be a massive cost to the city that we don't have the money for. And when ARPA dries up, which is very soon, we already have to make up $2 million. So those of us who have been, you know, trying to protect and defend the police budget, we're not for cutting ever the police budget. We need the resources we have. But is the city in a financial position to add 13 more officers? I mean, I'm unaware of any identifiable long-term revenue stream for us to do that. I don't think we can afford more taxes to do it. If that's the solution, you already have the highest residential tax burden in Massachusetts in this town. And the business community already has among the highest business tax rates. So I don't know if that's the ultimate game plan. But if ARPA's, I mean, that's a quick fix that's about to go away. As a matter of fact, just to give the mayor some additional ammunition to support what the mayor was saying here a minute ago, Chicopee received $34 million. They took $10 million and put it into their savings account, okay? We got $39 million, $5 million more than Chicopee. We had to spend 8 of it just to balance our budget for 4 years, 2, 2, 2, 2, right? That's the difference. I don't think people are quite grasping. We are in a very difficult financial position in this community. And we're not in a position to be adding on to these expenses without either identifiable tax resources or without grant funding to make up the difference, right? We're going to have all we can to keep body and soul together to not make cuts. So why are we in a position, how do we fund 13 new officers? How do we do that? That's like next year and the year after. How do we do that and not lay these people off when the grant dries up?
I don't know. I don't know why you keep looking at me.
Because you're the police chief. Because you're the police chief. You're running the place.
Yeah,
you know, and you're the mayor. I don't know. I'm a part-time worker that comes in at night. What do you guys think?
I asked the chief to put something together that'll, you know, and if we can do it, this is what it would be, right?
Right.
But obviously there's the realistic side of things, and you know, and we've talked about that.
Sure.
We're very mindful of that situation. I just wanted, you know, to have a candid conversation about it.
I mean, it's
whether or not
noble,
it can
right?
happen.
I mean, we support, obviously, you know, I mean, like overtime is different, right? Because like overtime is your current force and that can ebb and flow, right? So that if you've got money now, you do more overtime. Next year, you have less, you do less overtime, right? So there's no layoff situation, it's not a long time, but when you hire somebody, you're not gonna lay that person off next year, right? We're committed to that position on a long-term basis. So how is that? I mean, I can see where, okay, I'm assuming for 488, you're going to do X, Y, Z and, you know, do a lot of different things that you're going to do with that, which perhaps you're going to go into this evening. But the 13 positions, I just want to make sure when I'm looking at a number that says 256 on this piece of paper, we all understand it. It's not 256. That's a fraction of what the annual cost is.
That's correct.
All right, great. So, okay, so I guess the rest of it in terms of, let's see, anything else, police? I mean, crime analyst. I personally think that one's a home run. I mean, that job, in my opinion, is something we long should have had because that goes to efficiency. And that position, in my opinion, is going to be supportive of grants, to justify additional dollars. That position, in my opinion, is going to make a better, more effective utilization of our police services. We've discussed that position for over a decade being there, and we've never been able to seal the deal on doing that. I like that. I've always supported that position because that gets to us doing the job more effectively and better. That actually saves us money, in my view, because it talks about how we're distributing assets and where, and that position, I think, has been shown to pay for itself. So I have less reservation on that one. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Councilor Murphy-Rambolati.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a lot of questions. But one clarifying question. On page 27, which is the Office of Public Safety and the $1 million line item for Ezekiel's plan, what confuses me is that there are parts of the plan that are included in the $1 million, but they're also listed in the supplemental, like the crime analyst that was just mentioned, which I'm also thrilled about. Wanted that for a minute. And then like the Board of Health, sanitation inspector, that's also listed in the supplemental in that department. So I guess I'm just looking for some clarification on, do I make sense when I'm asking?
Yeah.
Thanks.
You make perfect sense. I mean, this is new territory for most of us. You know, it's not the budget, but the way this is being done. The crime analysis, 40,000 is not the base salary. It's the rest of this year.
The rest of the fiscal year. Yeah.
Okay, so the base salary is going to be 65,000, 75,000. Originally, last year it was asked to be 65. But I think Councilor Murphy-Rambolati is sitting on a point is, you know, we're dealing with a last-minute supplemental budget, which is important and understood, and Mayor, you did a fine job of presenting it and giving us, I think, what we need to know, but there's a lot more to it than just voting on numbers.
A couple of points I want to make for you here, clarifying points. In the chart, in the plan, Councilor Murphy-Rambolati?
Mm-hmm.
No, was it you that mentioned it, or was it cocaine?
Me.
You. You'll see the third column where it identifies the funding source. Now, that chart there is more than $1 million. And we just identify the different funding sources. So the crime analyst, it says raise and appropriation. So when you go to the police department budget, you'll see the 40 figure there. So there's three different four if you include citywide cameras. You'll see capital stabilization, which you've already done, you've approved, but it's part of the bigger plan that we're trying to reflect to the public. You have revenue, ARPA revenue replacement, and then there's also a different revenue replacement, which the city treasurer can talk about. Then you got home ARP, you see the affordable housing development, TBD, to be determined, and I just identifies the home ARP because there's several. So this is the chart in front of you just identifies the different things that we're going to tackle to improve health and safety in our community. Now, the other clarifying point is the special article is currently identified as 1 million, and that's to offer us the flexibility to go forward and plan, and because these numbers, they're not set in stone. So what can be 80,000, probably 60,000, or maybe 85,000. And so really the special article, rather than your traditional line-by-line budget for a department, it's more like, all right, here's our objectives, here's what we want to achieve, and then just kind of monitoring and executing it from that special article. And it's it goes through the fiscal year, so there's no like by year end we have to have, you know what I mean? So it'll just go over into the next year. again, gives us the flexibility to start tackling these things. An example, let me see here. Some of the things that we're going to be waiting on, there's the opioid money that we're all still trying to, Bissonnette could talk more about it than I can, we're all trying to figure out before we can actually start expending it. But there are things in this plan that can be sustained through the opioid funding source. So until we figure out the administrative, however we want to manage it, right, there was a stabilization versus an expense account, and we have the funding source there to allow us to launch and just go forward and do what we need to do to get these off the ground. So you're not looking at it like you normally look the regular budgets. This is a special article revenue that you'll be voting on, and what's in front of you are things that we look forward to do. And believe me, I'm not into going into any weird direction. If the council doesn't agree with 13 officers, I'm not going to go and hire or go forward with a process to hire 13 officers. But the flexibility will be there. It's not going to require me to come for a special line item transfer or the traditional methods of how we deal with the funding. And Tanya can probably explain a little more into the special article and what it is and what it means and how it works.
Can I ask another?
Yep.
Thank you. That is helpful. That was kind of one of my questions, was the special article. So I would, if Tanya has anything to add, that'd be great. But I appreciate the rental registry. That's something I've been talking about for a while. There's a lot of things that I do appreciate, and I went through the plan, and what I think, I also have similar reservations about how we fund 13 officers going forward, and I don't think it totally reflects to us what that price tag is going to look like long term. But I also, I know that the audit was mentioned, and the audit mentions that there should be 13, or not 13, but more police officers. It might have actually specifically said 13. Is that right?
17 to
17.
30 more.
But, one of the things that it also talks about that I just feel like is not being discussed, and maybe it's being discussed and not in front of us, and that's fine. I'm not trying to be a counselor who micromanages, but a big thing that the audit discusses is the training of our new officers. And I don't see any numbers in here reflected for how we're going to address that going forward. That did seem like a big thing in the audit, is that a lot of our new officers, that maybe it's different now since the audit came out, and I would love to hear that. But as you all know, I run an entrepreneurship program, and I help small businesses as my full-time job, and I work with people who think that if I give them $100,000, they'll be a successful business owner. And I tell them all the time, it doesn't matter if I give you $100,000 if you don't have the right systems in place, and if you're not, working to manage your business well. So while I recognize that the audit does say the need for more officers, and I can appreciate that, and I am someone who spends 90% of my time on High Street specifically. I've talked to you all multiple times about this, but I understand that. It would give me some more assurance to know that we're considering the training, and not just for new officers, but for existing officers. I don't really see that here, and maybe there's something I'm missing. So thanks for letting me.
Chief, can I just go real quick? So I'm going to pass it off to the chief. Obviously, when that came out, we took that very seriously. So training actually has been going on. And he can talk about that and give you an update on where we are and what's he doing differently than in the past and whatnot. But there is an education and training for municipal employees focused on compliance and enforcement in the Ezekiel plan.
Yep.
We popped in there a number of 60,000. I wasn't including training for officers, but if and we could talk about that, if there is a gap or you think you could do more, that number, and this is the example, right? Like, This is why I want the $1 million article. So it gives you that flexibility to say, okay, you know, the 60,000, there's additional, the vacant buildings conference is coming up next year.
My favorite conference.
We've sent them 2 years ago. I want to send them again. I'm looking to use that funding source. The personnel department, who's been excellent working with the different departments and, you know, getting feedback from departments, what kind of training do staff needs and whatnot. So we've kind of put that figure in there of 60,000 to do DPW related training, and other department head enforcement related training. But, you know, the chief is going to talk about what he's been doing. But if there is an opportunity to do more, like this, you're right, this is it. This would be the time to do it. What do you need? 20 grand to train officers on XYZ? You know, this is what we're looking to do. We want the education and training is going to be an important part of everything we're doing here to ensure better safety for the residents, no matter what subject area department we're talking about.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Okay, so I can address the training. I think the audit was a little off base when it talked about that. It made it sound like we didn't do any training. I think what they were focusing on was an accredited field training program. We can get there, and we're building that way. What the audit pointed out is we used to train our officers at the reserve level. We did all our more field training at that level, and then when they went to the academy and came back to us, they had already been through our field training. That had to change with the police reform, and it sort of happened at the same time we were doing the audit. So the audit, I guess you could say they caught us with our pants down in a way, because we were switching over, but we hadn't even had a class graduate yet under the new reform bill to make it happen. So yeah, the audit mentioned it. It wasn't like we didn't know it. It was coming. So since those classes have graduated now, we do have a training program in place where they come out and they rotate after 3 weeks to the different shifts, and then ultimately are assigned to their regular shift. And it's about 9 to 12 weeks right now. We want to expand that. To answer your question, what can help us get there is more officers, because an accredited field training program requires officers to be assigned as field training officers, not to count in your numbers, right? So like if the guy's in doing field training that night, he can't be in your regular car. That's not an accredited field training program, okay? You can do it that way. It's not, as they like to use the terms, best practice. That doesn't mean it's the only practice. It might be the best practice if you have those resources. Again, if we want to get there, that's what it is. But the officers are being trained when they come out of the academy, now after, not before, because now we don't really have reserve officers working for us for 2 and 3 years ahead of time like we used to have. So that's the change we've made. As we increase our numbers, we want to expand that field training program and do more with it. The officers that have been involved in that have been, for lack of a better word, sort of pre-selected, that the ones that are doing the training now, and that's just how we have to do it based on what we have for resources. So I guess the answer is it's not specifically addressed, but obviously the increase in officers would allow us to address it more than what we're currently doing, if that makes sense for you.
I'll mull it over, thanks. Appreciate it.
All set?
For now, yeah, thank you.
Councilor Israel Rivera.
Thank you. So real quick on that piece. So it sounds like there is and there isn't a training. And that's the piece for me that I'm still trying to figure out, because that didn't clearly answer what is the training a newly officer goes through for an FTO, a field training, right? Can you walk us through that real quick?
So the officers graduate the academy, they come to the department. They're put in group, depending on how many. I think the last group, if there was 6, we broke them up in 2, 2, and 2, and put them on different shifts. They're not assigned to the shift right away as counting as the numbers. They're not going to be just put in a car by themselves. They're brought to the shift, and then they do 3 weeks on each shift. So every 3 weeks, they rotate to a new shift, so that they're learning all 3 shifts.
And that's a consistent system and a policy that's in place right
Yes,
now?
yes. And then at the end of so imagine you come out, you're a new officer, we put you on day shift for 3 weeks, then you go to 4 to 12 for 3 weeks, then you go to midnights for 3 weeks, ultimately ending up back on day shift for the final 3 weeks. Once that's done and completed, if an officer has deficiencies during that time, they could do another 3 weeks or another 3 weeks. We keep them in that training mode until we're comfortable that they are able to work on their own. And then once we get to that point, then the officers are assigned to the shift permanently.
Yeah.
And then they're basically on
I mean, I don't
at times.
I don't mean to speak out of turn because I'm not an officer, but I've spoken to certain people, and for them, or for the people that I have spoken to, there is some form of informal training, but it's not an actual like formal training. So that's the piece that I'm kind of questioning, right? I understand accreditation takes time,
Right.
but I think the question has been in public safety for about almost 2 years now, or about a little over a year. And we've brought it up several times and still has not been addressed. So that's why I think the questions are coming up now, right? So if we're asking for funding and doing all these things, there are a lot of questions that have come up in public safety that have not been addressed to me, right? And now we're here at this point where we are addressing public safety and making a significant request. So there's a lot of questions that I have, especially throughout the processes. There's some regarding the audit. I think the audit also pointed out that there are officers that could be repurposed to actually be on the streets, right? Then rather than be behind a desk or doing various civilian duties. Have we explored that before we go into exhausting more resources? Because I think that if we go into that, we could probably find a couple more officers that could be on the streets to help mitigate the situations that we are coming up with now. So for me, there's a variety of different issues, right? That is one. I think there is as well coming forth with the plan itself, the cameras, right? In the audit, it asked for a capital improvement plan for all the maintenance of police and cameras throughout the city. Is there a conversation on the capital improvement plan to maintain the $256,000 that we're going to spend on cameras, right? We put these cameras up now, but then how do we prevent coming to the situation we are now, 30 years later, where the cameras don't work and are not operational, right? The other piece is too is, can we use the cameras for like if someone hits my car and I didn't see it, right? Is the camera able to be used for that moment too as well in the court of law? So that way, I mean, the taxpayers in a sense, are approving this and paying for some of this. So I remember in the past, the cameras that were put up before by Chief Scott, you could not call to actually utilize the cameras if somebody hit your car or swiped it. So for me, it's like, if you can't utilize them in that way, that's a red flag to me, right? The 13 new officers, Counselor Jourdain kind of addressed a lot of the points I wanted to address. He kind of subtly did it a lot better than I possibly could at this moment, but give me some time, I'll get there. Right.
Second term coming up.
Yeah, I'm working on it, right? Maybe not another one after that, but we'll see. Crime analyst, I'm with it, 110%, because then then we'd actually have data for the plan, right? Like we'd have 10 years worth of data that can actually say that crime has risen over the last few years instead of just saying that crime has risen, right? We need to actually have the data behind it so that we can support it. So that way we could talk about how we're gonna create measurable outcomes to move forward in trying to mitigate crime, right? I kind of don't see any of that stuff. I kind of see a lot of the stuff that, in my opinion, has been done in the past. For some people, they believe it worked. For me, it feels like all it did was spike crime, right? But hey, there's difference of opinions here. Education and training, I agree with. Homeless liaison, I question that. And I question that a lot, not because I don't support the homeless liaison, the movement, and don't understand. I think for me is that, like, what are they gonna kind of really do if housing, there is no housing, right? And there is no shelters right now at the moment. So are they just gonna sit in the office and not collect money, but get paid to refer people out? I would prefer that to be a position where we talk about the community responder model, right? And we have people on the streets that can actually do things that would cost us a lot less, right? 13 officers, huge numbers. I think 13 community responder people would be a lot cheaper than 13 officers and possibly mitigate the 29,000 calls that you just mentioned earlier. So for me, it's like there's a lot of things different approaches that we could possibly take that would save money and actually save time and effort for the police department. But, I mean, we'll get there. Housing legal counsel.
If I can interrupt.
Nah, man. You know what? Go ahead.
We're on the police department, Councilor Rivera. I don't know where you are.
I'm here on the safety plan. This is the safety plan.
What safety plan?
Ezekiel's plan. Is that not what we're talking about?
Ezekiel plan is not in the budget.
But we're
Except for the $1 million.
We're going over the Ezekiel's plan that's in the supplemental budget. Okay, that's
It's
fine.
in the million. No,
I won't.
If I'm wrong,
just so
I'm
everyone
wrong.
can see. It's okay.
On page 27.
Thank you. I get like 20 minutes. Other people get like an hour, but it's cool.
Oh, get the fiddle off your shoulder, will you?
Nah, I'm just saying.
Is it part of the Ezekiel fund in the $1 million?
All
if
of
I'm
this
wrong,
is all
I'm
is
wrong.
part of Ezekiel's plan. Is it not?
I read the Ezekiel plan, like I said earlier. It's great, but
That's fine. I'm done. Thank you.
It is.
No, it's cool. It's cool. It's fine, bro.
I don't want to cut you off if it's part of police.
It's okay, bro. Everything I say is like that. It's cool, bro. We're here. Go ahead. Do you?
This is, I'm sorry, with all due, this is in the plan.
Councilor Rivera, go right ahead. We're on 3 pages out of 28. It's 8:30. Go right ahead.
Yeah.
Councilor Givner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a clarification, and I thought that this is probably a good time to ask about it. When we put new officers into the academy, do we hire them? Do we hire them and then put them in the academy, or do they get hired based on whether or not they get through the academy successfully?
Officers are hired off the civil service test itself. They're can be put into reserve list first, and when they are ready or at some point, and I think it's a little bit of a difference with the Police Reform Act, where the academy is the next step before they become permanent police officers, and then the field training, which what used to be considered as part of reserve work, is now no longer considered to be field training until the academy is completed. So it kind of answers your question. It's a good question, but it's the reserve list and the civil service list helps us have people in the roles when permanent positions come up.
Okay, so am I right to understand that we do not hire people before they are completing, before they complete the academy and are successful? Or when people fail in the academy, are they already our employees?
Chief.
Yes. They're sworn in before they go to the academy.
Do we have to swear them in beforehand? I guess I'm a little confused about that.
If they don't finish the academy, then they are, then they're removed. They have to finish the academy in order to be full-time.
So,
They collect
and
unemployment.
then
They
another
don't collect-
follow-up.
No. They don't collect unemployment if they fail the academy, no.
Okay, and then a follow-up is, if they get hurt at the academy, is that something that the city of Holyoke is then responsible for?
They can,
Like for
if they get hurt, can they go
workman's
back to the
comp?
academy? Is that what you're asking?
No,
If
I'm
they get
asking if they
hurt,
get
and
hurt at the academy when they're not full-time employees officially yet, we have to pay for if they're in the hospital or something.
Yes, we do pay for their injuries, and then with obviously the goal of getting them back. If it's a long-term injury, then no, then they'd be separated.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the chief of police?
I had one more.
Councilor Jordan.
As we consider the 13 request, which obviously, it's a big ask, but is there something else we should consider in, like, for example, if, I believe we added 3 officers, because one of the things that was important was the traffic bureau. But say we were to add the 13 or 6 or whatever that number is there some corollary? Maybe we could reduce overtime to help us compensate for some of that so that, the council takes that into consideration as we make our decision about adding 13. Maybe we save X dollars. Have you maybe put your finger on that?
I didn't come up with a number, but there's absolutely no question we would save overtime if we hired 13 officers.
Could you try and, because obviously,
With some-
right,
yeah.
we're always, of course, the hope is even if we added the 13, it seems like we never get, we've got 95, we never actually get to 95,
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah. And if we went to 108, we'll
probably-
probably never get to 108, right?
We would probably operate somewhere between 100 and 103.
Exactly, right. So, as we consider all that, and then maybe if you could take it back and give this some more thought about, hey, I see there's also a request here for 488 on the overtime, but maybe if we actually added the 13, maybe we don't need more overtime. Maybe we could keep the overtime flat and we'd get the services. I'm just trying to understand, this is targeted overtime, but maybe the $1 million that you're currently spending.
Correct.
Maybe if we gave you all these extra officers, the $1 million becomes $500,000. I don't know, and then there is an offset. I just want to make sure you get full credit for what you're trying to do here.
I believe, I can definitely look at that.
Okay.
It would certainly be an estimate.
Right.
But I could certainly look at that. I would anticipate, once we get those 13 out and they came onto the shift,
Yep.
I was able to put those onto the shifts, especially with the newer contracts that were signed, there's no doubt in my mind that overtime would go down.
Right, because then if it's, yes, there's $1 million here going up for the 13 salaries, but on the other hand, if we saved half of it in overtime, then it's really only a 500,
I think the long-term impact of those officers would be that this other portion of money you're speaking of, the 400,
The
plus thousand,
488,
488, that is being used specifically to target and do walking beats and bike patrols and that type of stuff, you would have those extra officers on
Exactly.
shift, so you wouldn't need that. And
That's
going
kinda my
back
point,
to our
yeah.
earlier conversation, if we had some pop-up event and we had extra officers, we wouldn't have to hire them. It could actually impact the special events line item as well. So the way, just as you spoke of other line items being impacted, so would other areas also be impacted.
Right, so maybe take that back, that feedback, and consider it, and maybe send that back to the Finance Committee with some additional thoughts. So,
Sure.
yeah, we would appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilor Maldonado Velez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I ask the questions, I just want a point of clarification. We are doing items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, correct?
We are doing a budget review of a supplemental budget, which is item number 3 presented by the mayor. 4, 5, 6, and 7 are connected to that. 6 and 7, the funding for the contract is in the supplemental budget. The executive summary, the mayor's supplement, is part of the supplemental budget explanation from the mayor. And Ezekiel's plan, Ezekiel's Operation Safe, as we stated, is on page 27 in the supplemental budget. So the answer is yes and no.
So, but when the committee took up these orders, they were taken up together as a package, correct?
For the reasons I just stated, because they're connected to the supplemental budget, yes.
So I just wanted that clarification because I spent 2 years being silenced either which way, and it felt like there was a moment of my fellow Councilor Vera being silenced when he was asking the questions around Ezekiel's plan, which is, to your point, all connected. With that said, my question is, because about a little over a year ago, I did put in the order for to fund an Office of Public Safety. The public safety line item has had $900 for a couple of years from what I've seen. And one of my things when I came to the council is let's get some money into this public safety line item, mainly because for a long time, public safety has automatically been assumed to be the job of the police department. And my belief is that it's not just the police department that's in charge of public safety. There's a lot of other aspects, similar to what to Mayor Garcia was saying earlier. There's preventive measures that are included in public safety. I guess my first question is to the mayor, this $1 million in the supplemental budget, does that include the 13 police officers?
Yes.
And that's where you lost me, and I'll be honest. I do appreciate there's work or an effort to fund an office of public safety, and a lot of the things that we have discussed, such as the Office of Tenant Protection and the Landlord Registry, which is all things that I've been advocating for and other people in the community have been advocating for. But these are things that I've been advocating for over a year. And I know this is Ezekiel's plan, and we had this tragedy in our community, but this is also not the first individual that we've lost to stray bullets. At the beginning of the year, we had a worker in the mall also being lost to a stray bullet. And it's sort of frustrating that we've had to get to this point to say, oh yeah, we can fund it this way, when a year ago it was almost, we couldn't do it, right? And not here in 2 months, so I'm just really at this point speaking as much as I can in the what I have left of my time here. But it is frustrating because we keep getting told no, and now we have this supplemental budget that's saying, oh, we possibly can. When from the beginning we were saying we possibly can, let's look at alternative ways to do this. The other part of it though is when I put in the order to request $500,000 to an Office of Public Safety, there was an additional order that was also put in, and that order was put in an RFP so that we can study some sort of community responder model, some sort of Office of Public Safety, so that we can get it going. A year later, this hasn't happened, but it could have been happening already. And I think a lot of the conversations that we're having about, we have this plan in front of us, but what's the sustainability? And I think that's a question that a lot of us as counselors have. How is this going to be sustainable? Something that possibly, maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe could have been answered if there was an RFP when we put it a year ago, right? I commend your efforts, and I'm not really trying to go back and forth here. I think it's frustrating. And this is not the first time. This is not gonna be the last time that we discuss this. I know this is also in the Office of Public Safety. Not the Office of Public Safety, the Public Safety Committee, to be brought up as well. And we'll love to discuss further once I get more information from different departments and people and whatnot. But it's not sustainable. It's almost like, what's the term that I keep hearing? Smokes and mirrors. It says, let's just do this to the community like we're doing something, when in actuality we're not doing much, because there's no sustaining this effort that we're trying to put forward. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Counselor.
Mayor Garcia.
Can't say, I don't mean a back and forth and not it. It's misguided and partially wrong, Counselor, just to be blunt and straightforward with you. Now, you're talking about a year ago an RFP. That wasn't the firestorm that I inherited, and the time and commitment to put together an RFP and go through we didn't even have a procurement director at the time, yet alone 11 or so union contracts that were up at the same time, and a budget that has been historically not balanced, trying to get through the storm here. So yeah, forgive me if I didn't jump in an RFP in Office of Tenant Protections, but I heard it, I acknowledged it, and I like it, I agree with it. I think I've spoken favorably of such a thing. Considering the economic situation on the sustainability part, you're right. At that time, it wasn't sustainable, but today is different. Why? Because the opioid settlement money is coming to fruition. We're understanding more what we're going to be getting between now and the next 20 years. In fact, I think currently sitting in our general fund, and I can't touch it until free cash is certified and I can move it into the newly created opioid stabilization that was established, there's about $501,000 sitting in there, and a little over $100,000 that we'll be getting every year for 20 years. There's enough there to get a program off the ground, and that's my sustainability plan for what I'm calling the mayor's division of community response. And that'll include in this plan, if you read it at all, which I don't think you might have not, includes 2 outreach workers. And I also include, and I wish Councilor Rivera was here, I could have responded to some of his points regarding the homeless liaison, who's part of that team. A 3-member team to do the outreach and community response as needed, so that we can be proactive in mitigating. And between the Director of Board of Health, myself, and Alicia, and yes, including myself, I do participate in these discussions, we've been that homeless liaison person working together. We don't have a dedicated staff person facilitating these issues and participating with the community partners to really not just, see a client and say, hey, oh, they didn't want no services, they denied and move forward, but really track folks through a by name list and making sure that all our departments are working together, understanding what the needs. If it's a issue of an absentee landlord, that homeless liaison is actively working on that, talking with our Board of Health and other departments so that as a city, we're being proactive in addressing issues ahead of time before they become actual problems. So there's a lot of good work that we foresee these 3 positions doing, and it will be sustained ideally. That wouldn't be a raise in appropriation. It'll be sustained using opioid settlement money. And so when it was clear, I also have to put my management hat on and make sure that I'm not doing anything that's going to do an unintended consequences to the city. Yeah, I didn't jump at the idea at that time because there was no sustainability plan or anything like that for that matter. As far as the 13 officers are concerned, and I love the idea of hiring 13 outreach workers instead, I think everybody agree that, that model. The issue is that we're imbalanced right now when it comes to the needs and the work that we're doing out of the police department. So, going back to our point about the community policing and the bike patrol and all that other stuff, we don't have the flexibility to do that level of proactive work. If we were adequate, and we're talking about hiring 13 more instead of 30, yeah, I would agree with those comments you made. But the only thing that's not sustainable or perceived unsustainable until we've really identified is really the 13 officers, which I don't need right now. That the 13 officers was to sustain the work we're going to do between now and the next 12 months. That the police department is building up. So it's not, if you vote on this, let's say tonight, this passes, I have this funding, access to this funding tomorrow, you're not going to see those 13 officers, or the net gets casted, and out of those 13, we might get 10, who knows, until 12 months from now anyways. And that's to sustain the work we've done out of the police department between now and the next 12 months. But simultaneously, at the same time, we're building up the division of community response that will include those very points that you've brought up in the past and that I have acknowledged and had agreed with you that yes, it'd be great if we can do that. That's in here. So I'm trying to take all the moving parts and build them up together, because enforcement has to work hand in hand with the social work side. You can't just do one or the other, because there's going to be an imbalance somewhere, and you're going to feel it in the quality out there in the public, and eventually you feel it in the ratepayers. So what I'm trying to do is strike a balance that raise the tides together so that we're hitting all our points and they're all working together. The idea of just focusing on policing, it's the chief is very clear on what my expectations are, and every officer that gets brought in and every person that gets promoted, I get to meet with and talk with, and I make very clear what my expectations are when it comes to policing. And it's one that strikes a balance, making sure that as we go out there and we enforce, that we're working with the community, that we're not over whatever. So I don't know, I think it's really easy to sit there and just throw out things that people might think will be going on and what might work versus this and what that community might do. But I can tell you right now, I've looked at this any which way possible. I acknowledge good ideas, and what I have to do is say, okay, how can I take that good idea and make it work And usually timing is everything. And to make a comment about me waiting until somebody died, no, I take personal offense to that. I'm not waiting until anything of that, but instead what I'm doing is taking what I've learned since I've been here and trying to make it work so that it functions. That's what I've been trying to do. And you get what you plan for. I don't shoot from the hip, Counselor.
Any further discussion on the police department?
Moving on.
I am not, and I never have, tried to shut someone off from talking. This is the Finance Committee. This is about funding. There's an idea I have not looked at or heard that I've not liked at some point. But when you put in the big picture, which this committee is responsible for, it's funding. And what happens a year from now and 2 years from now. And trust me, I've gone through bankruptcy, I've gone through a finance control board with this city. I saw what it did to Springfield. I'm sorry if Councilor Rivera thinks I shut him off, but I didn't. But the ARPA monies are not before us, with the exception of where they're used under the special act, special plan, whatever we're calling it, and that Ezekiel plan being put into the budget for, I'm not even sure how or why, because it defies all logic of Mass General Law financing. Regardless, we're done with 3 pages. We have 25 pages to go. We're out of time. This supplemental budget has to be acted upon. We have to set the final tax rate before December 29th. We have to finalize a lot of stuff here, which is good proposals, but we need to do it, and we need to do it quick. We can't even do it in the committee. All we can do is a hearing, as I stated, and then get whatever we heard tonight, questions answered, so we can take some, maybe next Tuesday. At the rate right now, we're still going to be here in this committee by next Tuesday. Any other questions for the police department? Thank you, Chief. We have 2 contracts on the agenda, 1 contract on the agenda. I think we can do this quick. Items 6 and 7 came in as, it's 1 contract, but it's on the package deal because we vote on the funding. We don't negotiate contracts. We can't interfere with negotiation of contracts. We can only say after they're negotiated, can we afford them? So on 6 and 7, if there's no objection, we'll take them off the table to connect them to the supplemental budget, and the monies will be found on the page I just lost. Page 20 and 21. With us, we have the law department representing the mayor on these contracts that were negotiated. We have representatives from the union, the Firefighters Association, and we have our chief of the fire department with us this evening to answer any questions. Mike, did you want to run us through the contracts? Or I'm sorry, Solicitor Ball is with us. I apologize, Lisa. I didn't see you.
It's okay. I think it's pretty straightforward. This took a little while to get us to this agreement. I think it's a really good agreement, both for the local 1693 and for the city. This was, we reached an agreement right on, not on the eve, but on the day of a scheduled arbitration in front of the JLMC. It's a 3-year contract. The city did get some things back, and I think the chief is going to address the benefit to the city of what the city received in return for what the city is giving to the fire department. The second article on overtime, the paragraph 8 originally right now reads 30 minutes. The firefighters agreed to have it be 60 minutes, and it is going to save us on overtime, because when the firefighters are called back on mutual aid, they get a minimum of 4 hours overtime. So having it wait until 60 minutes instead of 30 minutes is a big benefit. and a good cost savings for the city, and I think the chief can explain that further. In Article 3, with sick leave, the mayor has been trying to pick away at some of the buybacks that are, really large buybacks that we're paying out when people are leaving. So we're starting slowly. It's with new employees. It's, we're not going to see the benefits of some of these things that we're putting in the contracts now, but the benefit is going to be there years down the road. So slowly, we're trying to reduce the amount of buybacks that are happening when people retire. So this particular paragraph used to read, and it does still read for current employees, that we buy back a maximum of 1,000 sick hours. So it'll be 900 for new employees, and the goal will be that we just, continue to reduce that so that we, don't get into a position where we're, paying out these very large buyouts that we are doing currently. Other than that, it's a 3-year contract. I think it's, I haven't added these up. I knew what it was, but it's, I believe it's maybe 11 for one group and 9 for another. It's 8 actually for the alarm department, and I think maybe 10 or 11 over the course of 3 years for the fire department. And this is pretty in line with what other fire departments are making. It took us a long time to negotiate with the fire department, but we did take this very seriously and look at other fire departments around the area. I mean, we did this with all the union contracts to see, how are other people being paid in other communities. And I think what we found was the firefighters in Holyoke were making a lot less than some of the neighboring communities. And so we were trying to bring that in line with what other communities are paying. So I think it was a fair negotiation. I think this is fair to the city. I think it's fair to the firefighters. And I think if there's any other questions, I think the chief is there and he might be able to answer these maybe better than me.
No, you did a good job, Lisa. We appreciate it. The increases we're talking about is Unit A would be beginning July 1, 2022, which is fiscal 2023, the 3% increase. The next increase is 2.5 plus 1.5, which would be a 4% increase in exchange for the acceptance of the active shooter requirement. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so I mean, some of the requirements that the fire department is already doing, they're already participating in training. I think there was one in January and one in May. And it's really, training to allow them to be, first responders, and, if there's like an active shooting happening, that they're on the scene faster, which, if somebody's injured, we really need them on the scene faster. I think they had a training in January that was with the police department. So it's really compensating them for something that, they're already participating in.
And then the final for Unit A is a 2.5 with 1% added for the same thing, totaling 3.5.
Right.
Would Unit B be in the 3%, 2.5, and 2.5? What's the difference between Unit A and Unit B? Chief?
Unit B is the alarm division, and Unit A are the firefighters.
Gotcha. And to our auditor, Tanya, do you have we have the budget figures by line item, but do you have the totals for this, it's retroactive for this year, correct?
Yeah, what's in the supplemental budget is the retroactive for fiscal year 2023 plus the 2024 cost.
And do you have a total on that? I mean, we have it, but not
A breakdown.
The total for that is, $777,503. So that would be for 23 and 24, and for 2025, we would have an additional cost of $321,340 approximately.
Can you break down the 777 for 23 and 24?
Do you want it by, I have it actually by individual lines, if you
No,
want.
not necessarily, just in the aggregate, just so we understand the annual impact. Because that's 2 years combined with the retro.
So the 2 years combined, I have 262,322 for salaries. For 2023, 2024 was 351,217. So the total of those was 613,540. That's just for the salaries for 2023 and 2024.
Okay.
And then I have the other lumped together
Okay.
as 163,962.
Okay. All other expenses, 2 years worth.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Tanya. And just real quick before questions and answers, I apologize. Who's president? Anybody want to speak on behalf of the firefighters? Mr. Bartholomew, come on in.
No, it's Will.
Will. I can't see you through Carl. Anywhere,
Yeah,
wherever you, come on in.
Come on in. Make yourself comfortable. Just push the button there, Will.
Good evening. Long evening. Yeah, like Attorney Ball said, it's been going on. I think we started December of 21. That's why it seems the 2 years we've been negotiating since then. And then we settled up at about a month ago and stuff. So that's why it just seems the 2 years, it was a long time.
Well done. It's always nice to see it when it comes to fruition and gets before us. And I mean, for the law department, the mayor, the chief, I'm sure you were part of this. And more. All right, everybody, questions, answers?
I'm ready.
You good?
No,
Good?
I have a question.
A question, Councilor Drain.
Yeah, I don't know, whoever wants to tap, maybe Lisa. And again, I'm going to come back to a mantra of the money part of this, fine. You guys well deserve this. Random drug testing. This was in the contract for the last one. It got pulled out. This is the only department without random drug testing operating heavy equipment. The DPW has it. The police department has it. The fire department still does not have random drug testing. How is it we can have yet another contract of public safety officers operating heavy equipment that this is not as a protection to fellow firefighters and a protection to citizens, that we ensure that we have random drug testing of employees? That should be common sense, basic policy for everybody. And if we needed to give an extra $200 a year or whatever it is to negotiate that in with them, because when I've talked to different firefighters, they basically said, yeah, well, we're looking for something in exchange. It's, people were supportive of it. I've spoken to the chief personally on this issue. It's still not there. How the hell does this keep happening? And I think we owe it to the citizens of Holyoke to make sure that we have a random drug testing policy for all of these people in the city operating, in particular, heavy equipment, dangerous, inherently dangerous jobs. This would never be allowed on a construction site or these other type of jobs. Everyone should be in support of this. And I'm really disappointed to see, apparently, this is still not there. So, is this never gonna happen? Or I guess we just keep waiting and it's reasonable suspicion, whatever that means. So that's just my editorial. Money, well-deserved. Glad the firefighters are getting the money, well-deserved. This department needs to be in compliance, the same as the DPW and the police. We owe it to citizens. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Can I add one thing? You're going to see two other items here.
Chief,
Yeah,
we're on team. Yeah.
Sorry. Just so you know, you're going to see two other fundings in different lines. One is hazmat and one's hazmat overtime that are also increasing.
Those are reimbursable by the state, but we're just having a new member added to the hazmat team. So when you guys see that, that's what that change is all about. And it's $2,500 because they're going to be added for half of the year. But those monies get reimbursed back by the state. I just want to make sure you guys knew about that also. That's not part of the contract.
Thank you. Councilor Maldonado Velez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for the chief or the president. Going through the contract, didn't see anything around diversity and inclusion, any sort of training. I wonder if that's part of the contract, or if you can answer what diversity training and inclusion training looks like within the fire department. Thank you.
We don't have anything in the contract specifically to exclusive training at this time. No, we don't.
Is there any training that is done by the city or that y'all, the firefighters, partake in or go through?
We've taken harassment trainings and other trainings similar to that. I think they're trying to come up with a class or something to train the individuals. Last I heard, there's a new class coming soon. I'm not sure when, but I know there's talks about that type of training.
Also, Counselor, maybe Lisa can clarify. I'm just remind the history here and what we've experienced. So we don't negotiate training. It's training is the training. And I think there was a situation where we had explored further the definition of training and diversity and inclusion, and I think we've came over that and currently putting that together as we speak. Kelly's working on it. So there isn't anything that says that they can't do or shouldn't do, like we don't have to negotiate, you know what I mean? It's not a term in a contract. It's just training in general, and diversity and inclusion training is included, like that's under that umbrella. You know what I mean? Like we don't have to spell it out in a union contract because it just falls under the category of training in the workplace or whatever the case.
Okay, so I should be checking in with Kelly.
But Lisa, I remember we were going through.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think when we're doing like citywide trainings like this, we try to be mindful, especially with the police and the fire department, that we have to think about the different shifts. And, you know, we also set it up so that, you know, it's more convenient by doing some of the trainings right in the police department or right in the fire department. And there were a few trainings, I think they were earlier this year. There was a training that took, two different trainings that took place. I think a harassment training, and then there was a diversity training as well that I think we only did one session, but I think personnel is looking to get that started again so that we can get everybody trained, because it was a situation where not everybody was able to get, it was only one session. So we need to get that one back on track.
There's no particular reason there was just one session? It's just scheduling?
It was, there were a couple things that, like, we just need to, you know, figure out exactly what we want the parameters of the training to be. I expect we're gonna see that come back around sometime, hopefully in the next month or two.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm all set.
Thank you. Councilor Israel Rivera.
Oh, he's about to speak. Let's cut him off.
Thank you. I'm here.
I'm only kidding.
We got jokes. Very funny. So I think the question for me goes to like, is that something that is DEI something that's a focus for us as a community? Because if it is, then that's something that we intentionally do, right? But if it's not, then we just have to then it's fine. It is what it is. But I think for us, it's clarifying that, because I remember in the past, there were some orders that were filed around that, and it kind of put somewhat of a requirement for anyone that has been hired in the city to have to go through some form of DEI training. And I know that other communities are doing this across the state too as well. So, I mean, it's not that foreign, but it may be foreign to us as a community, and I understand the growth processes and the learning piece. but it's also for us being intentional on whether or not that's something we want to do as a community. Thank you for my time.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman?
Mayor Garcia.
Yeah, Counselor, actually, we can bring her back and get an update. She's been actively working on building that, and obviously there's funding that's attached to that it's being planned for, and we're going to do it citywide. It's just, building it and then executing it. So we're trying to plan it out correctly as much as possible. But Kelly has been a rock star in trying to figure that out for us.
Chief, can you just explain the hazmat again?
The increases you see, one's for $2,500.
Overtime?
This is, the hazmat overtime's an increase of $3,505.
Yep.
And you'll see an increase in the hazmat.
Team standby?
Team standby of
Okay.
$2,500. Those are, we just had someone added to the hazmat team. They'll be starting soon. And what that does is that covers the stipends that they get and the overtime for the drills and callbacks. What the thing about those is those are all just reimbursable by the state. So we spend it and the state reimburses, that goes back in the general fund.
Okay. And when you say added to the team, the positions are the actual firefighters?
Right now we have we just got our second, we have one member on the regional state hazmat team. Now we're having our second member added. It's a great benefit to us.
Yeah.
We have that technical expertise, kind of at the.
No, and
it's a great it's great to have people on the team.
I appreciate that, and that's a good thing. I just want to make sure if anybody asks me next Tuesday where it comes out of the budget, they're actual firefighters that are added to the team.
Yes, exactly. One is actually a deputy chief and one's a lieutenant.
Okay. Thank you.
Ready for a motion?
Any other questions for the chief? Any other questions for the union? Any other questions on page 20 and 21? Good.
Do we need to, you want to take a vote on the fire contract?
Oh, that's a good question.
Appropriation.
The contracts, the vote we take, I think we should take a recommendation because the actual vote's going to be on the budget Tuesday.
Okay.
So usually we would do it together, but because it's not a transfer. So the chair will entertain a motion that we adopt and approve. Go ahead.
Yeah, motion that we recommend that we adopt and approve the fire contract.
I'll second that.
Motion made second that we adopt and approve the fire contract. The actual vote will be the funding, which was outlined and talked about this evening when we do the supplemental budget next Tuesday. So on the recommendation, roll call, Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Puello?
Yes.
Councilor Tallman?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson-Burgos?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern? Yes. So we'll forward that recommendation. A little different this time because, like I said, the monies will be with the supplemental budget. But it looks like we're in agreement with the monies.
Yep.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions for the chief?
Best of luck.
Anybody online?
Thank you.
Councilor Izzy, your hand's still up. You okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. My bad. I'll bring it down.
All right. Thanks. Look at DPW. Yeah. We'll just make a motion.
FYI, I'm leaving in 10 minutes, just so you know. I have to go.
Motion to go with the DPW budget?
Second.
Motion made second to invite Mr. Rossi in for questions on the DPW budget itself. DPW budget supplemental, is what we're looking at. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? Carl, welcome. And I think, looking at your budget, the additions is heavy motor equipment operator for $57,000?
Correct.
Okay, now, have we not been transferring out of that line item all year?
We transferred whatever was the whatever was the extra for the year.
I'm sorry, we're on page
33?
30. Starts on page 31.
31. Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
City property though, right? Or do we have any? No, we don't have anything on that. Looks like 30.
There were no additions or reductions in city property.
Okay, so
The
30.
administration is some reductions, but I didn't see, well, there is one addition in administration, which is education and training. That's on page 30.
30, yeah.
Oh, I see.
We can do reductions, but I think, other than the overall, consequence, I think they speak for themselves.
Can the mayor reduce a line item during the year without our vote?
I don't think so.
The only, a mayor and a department head can transfer up to, Tanya, without our vote? During the course of a year in the same category, personnel, in the same category or expense, the mayor and the department head can transfer monies, but only up to a certain amount.
They can transfer within the other expense line, and they can transfer from like personal services to benefits, but they can't increase personal services or overtime lines per ordinance. There's not like a figure.
Yep. Yeah, I'm good.
Figure, though.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. So I did jump ahead, but there is no really items for, on city property. So that takes us past 32, and 33 is highway and bridges. It's reductions. If anybody want to talk about the reductions?
Council, I just have a correction, if I can.
Councilor, Mayor Garcia.
So we've added 2 HMEOs, or proposed 2 HMEO positions in the refuse. And then after we've already submitted everything, it was actually supposed to be on the highway side. So if it's okay with this group, depending on what you discussed tonight, we can submit an updated or accurate version before the vote.
That's fine, yeah.
So in your memo, Mayor, you have under refuse collection, it says increase HMEOs by 57,065. Then you have hazardous waste collection plus 7,000, and then plus recycling contract line plus 96, and then reduce supply tools by 500. Are you changing any of those for?
The only one is the figure that's added to highway. Should have been added to, okay, so in the refuse?
Yep.
Well, there in front of you is the figure for highway. That figure should be under refuse, not highway.
Okay,
What's the number, Mayor?
50.
The 57?
57,065?
That's for 2 positions between now and the end of the fiscal year.
It says refuse, though, but it's supposed to be highway?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be
Okay.
highway. It's
Supposed to be highway.
Okay,
And does it have it in here where you're increasing it, or?
yeah, but on the wrong page.
Okay, what page?
It has it on 35, but it should be
Oh,
on
I see. Okay.
33.
Okay, so page 35 edition should be over on page
33.
33. I see. Okay, thank you.
57,065, okay.
You'll fix those 2 pages, right, and send it back to us?
If it's,
Okay, just for our records.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll make that note. That's all set.
Carl, how you doing?
Good.
I'm not trying to avoid reductions. The other, on page 35, the other addition, though, is another 7,000 for hazardous waste collection. I think it speaks for itself, but did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, that's what we do twice a year. We do 2 hazardous waste collections. So by contract with Casella, they do like $7,500 as part of the contract, and we have to do the other one, the other side. So it comes out to about $15,000 a year.
Okay. In motor vehicle fuel, I take it the cost of gasoline's gone up?
Yes.
And that's just, I think we talked about that during the regular budget hearings.
not there. That's not there.
Anticipating.
what are you
Mayor?
talking about? The 96,000?
Yeah.
That's other services.
I'm
not motor
sorry.
vehicle fuel.
I need a
Recycling?
ruler to do this.
The recycling contract?
Tanya, this budget got smaller.
Yeah.
Other services, Mayor. Carl, what's the 96,000?
Looks like recycling contract.
Oh, it's under refuse? Yeah. Jamie, the CPO director, made aware to me that the recycling contract was about $96,000 short for the
Yes.
recycling contract.
But
Okay.
we should hopefully be saving as we went back to dual stream. So we cut our recycling costs down to $7,000 instead of about $14,000 a month, down to $7,000 a month.
Oh, so that's a big, yeah.
That's interesting, so that can change. There's a potential cut that you can do there if you want.
We'll talk about that in front of the mayor. Any other questions for Mr. Rossi, superintendent of our DPW? Am I missing anything, Carl?
Not really. The only addition was the 2 HMEOs, and it was basically the $5,000 for education.
Okay.
We're saving all the sewer math questions for ordinance, I assume, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to.
We're not going to get into that tonight.
Silence anyone, but
I'm offended.
There's, no, I mean, we don't have line item control over the sewer budget.
That's being,
we do have a vote that we're going to have to take.
it's going to reflect the detach rate.
Yeah, but that's coming in next week. There is a.
Well, I'm just trying to understand how a proposed 600, again, I'd save it for another evening, but just for coming attractions, I'm intrigued by the mathematics of a number of things. One is the proposed $16 rate. I want to know how that got calculated. We'll get to that at some point. Second one is, how is it that the denial of a $600,000 sewer operation rate increase is into 1.5 something million? That number doesn't add up.
It's for 23 and 24.
Understood, but the argument being advanced is that because you didn't give us a 600,000 increase, therefore we are short 1.5 million. So can somebody show me how the math on that works?
So I do have online here Mary Monahan that's actually
No, please.
ready to break it down, but I'm not going to call her in yet. I just want to let you
please.
know that she's there. However,
No, I don't want to.
I think to my understanding, it's the
I retract my question.
The Division of Local Services is making us close that gap, and it's based on numbers that her and Abram came up with that, I guess we're going to be talking about another day.
At some
I just
point.
want to let you know that there is a method behind it.
We have a deficit in the wastewater treatment plant, we understand that. And it can be corrected by a rate increase, which I think we all understand, which could change the recap sheet, before we vote on the final tax rate.
Right.
But the only thing, and I did miss it, the only thing in your supplemental budget is you're adding $135,000, appropriating $135,000 for repair, or am I?
Oh, is that in here?
Repair maintenance of sewers.
Sewers, yeah.
And I thought we were getting these things out of the wastewater treatment budget and into the DPW budget, which I know it's the same, but it's not.
Yeah.
Out away from the rate users and into the infrastructure.
Mary's waiting to be leashed if you let her.
Well, we're going to do this in ordinance very shortly.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Unleashed.
I understand it's going to be on the agenda for.
Got it.
I'm not on the committee, but.
I'll have to talk to Linda. She's
Yeah.
12th. Okay, the 12th.
And I'm not trying to avoid it or silence anyone. I'm just trying to keep us focused on the budget. Any other questions for DPW?
Carl mostly had cuts, so it made it pretty easy.
Councilor Bacon?
Poor Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to note that for ordinance, I'm waiting for the answers to the question from Veolia, which I understand is forthcoming. And when we get that answer, I will put it on the agenda, and I hopefully will be able to put it on there for December 12th.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. On that note, I Pay you leave.
Councilor Rivera, Israel Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Councilman McGivern, kind of want to just apologize for the insinuation. That was not the message I was trying to put across. Just trying to clarify with regards to time when people are speaking, and that is all with regards to that. I totally recognize that I am chair of public safety, and I can totally pull this out of public safety and speak more on it when the chance comes to it. So thank you again, and I apologize.
Izzy, we're fine.
We're good.
We're fine. My patience isn't the best tonight, so it's not all you, believe me. You're good. Yeah, it's all Will.
Have a good night.
And I noticed the people that talk the most leave first.
Oh, boy.
Goodbye. Any further discussion for DPW and what? There's only one item, and we just hit it in the wastewater treatment, which we will get to in the into the ordinance committee with a better discussion.
So just that recycling contract increase of $96,000. So theoretically, assuming we save $7,000 a month between now and the end of the fiscal year, 7 times 6, probably cut that in half, but you know, we'll be assuming a risk of a potential shortfall because we don't know exactly.
That's
Yeah.
You got to play it safe, and worst case scenario, it becomes free cash. My opinion. That's just, you know. Anything further? Carl, thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Where are we going next?
Who's here? Everybody's gone.
City treasurer. Or do you have additions in your budget? Yeah. All right, why don't we bring in the treasurer? Anybody know what page?
Find out. Page 6?
Page 6. You can talk about reductions, but we're really trying to focus on
additions.
I really do need a ruler here.
Yeah.
$100,000 boiling certification, if you don't mind us hopping right in.
It's land court expenses, I believe.
Yes.
It should be, at least.
It is.
The mayor's cutting office expenses from a lot of places, so we might not have as many rulers kicking around soon.
Well, before the Patriot system was resolved, excess capacity was only $12,000.
Yeah, and what do we got now?
Well, it's hypothetical.
Yeah.
Joe.
Councilor Tom.
Yeah, Rory, the postage, is that going just to your department now? Wasn't it going to a different department?
Yeah, so there's thank you, Councilor Tallman. And yes, so all the postage has been centralized. That's been the case. What hadn't been happening is some departments didn't necessarily understand what our machine was capable of doing. So what you would see is the police department, law department, other departments going out, certified mail, so on and so forth, whether they were paying for it out of pocket and getting reimbursed, vice versa. That can all be done out of our office now. And it's just in the treasurer's budget. I'd be fine if it was in a different budget, but it's mine right now. So we do need those. Postage rates did go up. And at the same time, the tax billing service that we use has let us know that they, for a number of years, had been absorbing 100% of the postage costs. And that was a very unique deal that former purchasing agent Martins was able to get done, but they're no longer able to honor that. So we expect postage costs to be increased this year.
Now, that'll take you till the end of the year?
Correct.
Okay. Into the fiscal year, I mean.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions for our treasurer, Rory Casey? Rory, we appreciate your patience, and I know your work's been very time-consuming, but we appreciate your efforts and everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Keep the faith.
Yeah.
I'll miss these finance meetings.
I won't.
Chair.
I'm going to miss the people.
Certain people.
All right. Mayor, we have our auditor's budget. We have the tax collector with us. We have our building department. And am I correct that in those three budgets, we're looking at salary increases? Are they part of the professional services, or are they by ordinance?
So in the mayor's section of the budget, you'll see a contract negotiations line, and we're holding there per an idea you shared with us before when we were going through this. We're holding there an increase for PSA, an increase of 80, and for NAGE, because those are currently being negotiated. And so when there is a contract that we can present to you, there will require a line item transfer of the council. And so the reason why we're raising it is so that when you set the tax rate, the funding is there, and we're not scrambling around the budget trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it.
Understood. Tanya, can I, sorry, Roy. The PSA money's, $108,600 in the mayor's budget. Mayor just explained. Do they reflect in any of the members of the PSA already in this budget?
The mayor did give some of the PSA members additional raises beyond the 2%, which are located in the budget, which are taken out of that negotiation line in his own budget.
So, the reason for that is because the contract so we started doing the,
step raises?
What do you call it? The performance evaluations.
Performance, yeah.
And I think there were about two department heads that were in the PSA, that, where I've included that. So you'll see it under conservation, the conservation director. Museum director.
Health department.
And the health department? And the health department, those are the three. So it's not just a regular 2%.
Yeah.
And then, and Schedule A is non-union, so you'll see throughout the whole budgets, the Schedule A increases of 2%.
Okay.
When we came into the year, we didn't factor in a raise for the Schedule A. Oh, which is... Okay, some clarifications here. So
Okay.
PSA and AGE and Schedule A are the three identified groups that have not got any raises coming into this fiscal year. Schedule A I held off until this time of the year. And then PSA and AGE were just, getting into the negotiations of that. So and what do you say, Schedule A, AGE, and PSA? Yep. So.
Okay, so I'm not trying to, are there any questions from the committee or other city councilors?
Yeah, I got a quick one.
I'll get you in a minute.
Yeah, Mayor, so the Schedule A, 2%, so that is be going from, in the supplemental budget, from now until the end of the fiscal year?
No, from July 1.
Oh, from July 1.
Yeah, so it'll be retroactive.
And that money is in the, is it a current amount in there, or is it just 2%? I mean, how do we know?
Right now, it's reflected throughout. So if you go to any of the department budgets that have Schedule A employee, you'll see the 2% increase in the supplemental column.
Okay, so some of them are, they're there in the supplemental column.
Yeah, the
Every
reason
one.
why NAGE and PSA is not in that, because that one requires a contract, and Councilor McGivern's made very clear to me that there should be no increases until there's a contract in front of them. So we came up with this system right here to be able to honor that request.
In the amount on those two contracts that are not yet negotiated, is that the estimated amount or current, something that you projected that it's going to be?
Right, so it's just it's the combined salaries plus a 2%.
On those two different
On those
contracts?
two different, right.
Okay. All set.
And the evaluation ones, can you just send us a list or send me a list? So if I have questions next Tuesday, I can answer that this particular position had an evaluation done, and this increase was above the 2%. Am I making sense? Okay. And Tanya, Laura, Kevin, did you guys want to hop on? Do you have any questions for us, or anything that you want to talk about in the supplemental budget? Kevin, you got a lot of reductions.
Tessa's there too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Brooke. Tessa,
Oh, we're waiting.
question.
Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti.
Thank you. I think you sort of just answered this, or you just addressed this, so I just want to make sure. But when I'm all for paying city employees more, everyone knows that. I guess I just wanted to better understand how, I know that not everyone got an increase, and I'm wondering if that means there were performance evaluations done. So if that's information that you're planning on providing, I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, so we started to do evaluations, and we used the NAGE tool, evaluation tool that they had in their contract, because it was one that was there. I want to be consistent across the board, and I started with department heads, whether if you're a Schedule A employee or, sorry, not NAGE, PSA, whether if you're a Schedule A employee or a PSA employee. If you're a department head, we started there because it's a trial and error period. And I wanted to be sure that if we're going to go and do evaluations for employees they supervise, that we have a clear system that people understand, that we get, that departments have been through them themselves, so that they can take ownership of it and be effective when it gets to them executing evaluation. So here, we're talking about PSA. There was only 3 PSA department heads. With the exception of the building commissioner's salary range, he's maxed. He can't make more than what he's making now unless we do a range change in the contract negotiations. So you don't see anything there. But then the other 3 are department head PSA employees, which you'll see, my proposed increase for them. And also to keep those positions competitive, there is value that they've brought, and considering what other communities pay, we wanted to make sure we stayed competitive. But either way, that was the thought process of what got me here at this point. And I'm hoping that once we've kind of got through the Schedule A and the PSA department head level evaluations, we reconcile and ready to execute, kind of transition. Okay, now, let's do your, employees within your departments. There's some other, kind of like NAGE. We have to figure out how, make sure we're not conflicting with any contract in the NAGE language. There's things we're talking about now is how do we evaluate NAGE employees without creating an issue for us, and so we're actively looking into that.
Mayor, if I can just explain, the money, the line item you're talking about in your budget for PSA is something that we haven't done in years, but it's certainly doable. It's money that you want after we set the tax rate and the budget is final to negotiate some with the collective bargaining unit known as PSA and NAGE, or just PSA.
It's PSA and age, yeah, because they've came in, PSA and age and Schedule A all have came in with no increases, right? So the three have came in to the new fiscal year with no percentage increases of any kind.
So with the NAGE, they did a salary study, and what they're trying to do is make some of those positions more competitive with the other municipalities. The NAGE contract is already settled, but they want to bring these people up to a point of where they're getting paid something, similar, so that they want to stay in their positions. The PSA did not get any raise this year yet. So that is in there depending on what they negotiate. We did 2%, but they're still working on that. And those are the two that are in there. Schedule A is on the different pages, 2% unless the mayor saw fit to give a higher raise. Does that answer your question? So NAGE is already arbitrated.
Yeah, it is done.
But they want to increase some of those positions to be competitive.
Gotcha. Councilor Pelle's got this question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's really helpful. I'm just trying to understand how many people that's being divided by. So I see the 2760 for PSA. That's the one that's for the performance evals, right?
Yeah, that's for the whole PSA.
For the whole PSA.
So for the PSA, the performance evaluations were done for department heads. But there are other people aside from department heads that are also in the PSA. I want to say there's like 15. My computer died. Otherwise, I'd give you the real number. I did send a document out with the different names of the PSA and how much they're getting. So you'll see, what they make, what their 2% is. And if you look in the pages, if they got anything above that, it would be in the line item.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's 2760, 27,600, and there was 3 people that got the evals, but that 27,600 isn't necessarily going to just 3 people. It's for all the other supervisors.
Yeah, it's for the whole PSA employees.
Not everyone in PSA is a department head supervisor. They might be supervisors, like a manager or whatever, but they're not like a department head supervisor, which is a whole nother,
like the
a whole nother
planners
discussion.
under the planners and those types of positions, they're also considered the PSA. So.
Thank you.
Just a quick reminder, Josh, going back to what you said a few minutes ago, but when you have a contract, law department, whoever, on the table being negotiated, we cannot interfere with that whatsoever by state law. I think, I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying this because it's sometimes misunderstood. And whether the funding is in the budget or proposed, or a transfer is what we've been doing for too many years. It's not a bad thing, but we've been doing for too many years. And like you said, when you get halfway through a year, it's hard to negotiate because you got to find money somewhere to put in for a transfer. So your source, the line item makes sense, but when the contract is done being negotiated, it still has to come to us. And then we can say yay or nay. We can't say yay or nay like some counselors wish they can about items in the contract. We can talk about them after it's negotiated, but not until it's negotiated and signed. But then we vote on the monies connected to the contract. It's like tonight, the firefighter contract came with the budget. So we're recommending, we agree with the firefighter's contract. Numbers make sense, but we have to adopt the budget to ratify it.
Well, so, and this is where you and I debated last time. So if the money is, if you can vote with or without a contract, the monies can't move unless I have your vote, because we're talking about putting money into a personnel line item. So right now, you're holding it onto contract negotiations, and I can't, you can approve that today, tomorrow, I can't move that into a salary. Or,
Right.
you can, I can't move that until you guys vote on an actual transfer. But what we're doing is we're keeping it there as a placeholder, because you're about to set the tax rate. And we're identifying the funding source, so it's there. Once it's ratified, to stick with how you like it, we're going to be ready to give you a voted on contract so that you can be ready to do your vote accordingly, moving that money out and into the appropriate personnel line
I think
item.
you said exactly what I just said.
I did.
You did.
But just so you know, I'm still under the assumption that we don't have to do that. But I appreciate the process.
See, that's why I brought it up. Because I'm going to be gone. And, all right. Any further discussion? There was, and I lost it. Professional services, it's an addition.
Where are you looking at?
I don't know. I have 5 departments I've been looking at. Lisa, is there professional services addition in your budget?
Oh, there is for her too, yes.
Yes, there is. It's actually a bill from the police department, but I'm the only department that has a line item to pay it out of. It's to have, it was for an outside investigator to do an internal affairs investigation.
Okay.
Which it really did need to be done, outside the department. And I think the exact amount was $25,275. So I think that's what's reflected to put into my professional services so that I can pay it.
Gotcha. We actually talked about this in committee already. And Attorney Bissonnette was with us one evening. But thank you. That answers my question. Any other questions? The city solicitor, tax collector. Kevin, did you want to say anything? All the mayor did was cut your budget.
Oh, no, Mr. Chair. I'm fine with the cuts the mayor made. It was essentially money out of some vacant positions that wasn't going to be able to do anything anyway.
Understood, but I hope there are positions that you're still looking to fill in the future. Like sometime.
Yeah, I got a couple of candidates. I'm hoping I can make a move on one of them soon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Councilor Tallman.
Yeah, on the Mayor, on the sheet, the $97,871 for liability and damage insurance, what is that for?
I can answer that if you like. That is for our vehicle insurance and our property liability insurance. The premiums had gone up after we set the budget. So when we got our invoices, we added those up and we ended up with a shortfall. We did get a bunch of new vehicles.
Right.
As well, and there were some accidents and things like that affected our auto insurance too, so.
Okay, it just seems like a quite a big increase. That's why I was asking that question, because 97, that's almost $100,000, so I just.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
And if I could, Tanya, while you got your mic on, school department, when it comes to the supplemental budget, and I'm taking it this is votes that we have to take to set the tax rate. Is there anything, when we do the supplemental budget, that you can explain that we're doing for the school department?
So for the school, that's just the difference between the governor's budget and state funding and the conference committee. So those are actually state-funded lines for the school department so they can meet their net school spending.
So do we take an actual vote?
You can vote on it right in the book. The state lines you don't need to vote on, but the personal service and expense lines, those do need to be voted by city council.
Okay.
I think it's only like $1,900 or something like that now. I didn't really look at it, but. Page 28.
Yeah, it's 1614.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot. It was for, yeah, so they added into their other expenses the offset between their state revenues and expenses. So that's dictated more by
They
the
couldn't just absorb $1,614 into their budget?
They need that money. I don't think it's their choice. I think that's what the state requires for them to do, even though it's that small of amount.
Okay. Any other discussion on the supplemental budget? I know we did this a little bit different, but we did kind of, as of now, I think, done a line item review. I thank all the department heads, especially you who are still with us and stuck this out. I commend the mayor. This has never been done this way before. It is interesting. And we thank the auditor.
Yes.
Because as usual, the sheriff got us through this. If there's no further discussion, the appropriate motion would be to forward a supplemental budget with discussion for the full city council, and the full city council, either they are going to do a line item vote, or they can do a more general vote, if, you know, or maybe some, if there are any motions to cut the supplemental budget, and then motions to adopt what's left. But I think we've done our job. Motion made, second, to
motion.
refer this to the full
Full
city
city
council
council.
for a final vote. Any further discussion? No one online? No one in the chambers? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, roll call. Counselor Puello?
Yes.
Counselor Tallman?
Yes.
Counselor Anderson Burgos?
Yes.
Counselor McGivern, yes. All right, so the supplemental budget's going to the full city council. President McGee will take over as far as the format procedure, but expect it to be some discussion. We will highlight the answers that we were given this evening. If any questions come up, I think a lot of city councilors have been listening or participating in most of this evening. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, department heads. We appreciate it.
Thank
We
you.
got a couple items real quick.
Motion to take up items number 8 and 9 off the table.
Item number 8, introduced by Councilor Bartley. We're just looking for a mandated quarterly report for the year-to-date legal expenses incurred by the city of Holyoke's outside legal counsel caused as a result of the planning board vote opposing a project near the log cabin. Please refer to the 10-4 order adopted by the council. Off the table for discussion. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? So moved. Lisa, Mike, do we have something for Councilor Bartley?
There was something submitted on October 12th. The amount that it's outlined exactly what has been spent in 2023. And it's $4,747.52.
I have
So
it.
that's what has been spent for 2023.
Okay. This is the information that's been requested. Is there any questions for the solicitor? Councilor Puello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the total amount that's been spent?
That I don't have in front of me. That's been submitted before though. So whatever we put in the last time, I would just add those two figures together.
Thanks.
Good. Okay. Any further discussion? On the motion, the order is complied with. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? So moved. So it's actually item 9 is the,
Yeah, they submitted it as item 9.
okay. So item 9 is the answer to item 8.
Yeah, together.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Is that it?
I think that's it.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion made and second, we
Mr. Chair.
adjourn. I hope nobody's going to
Mr. Chair.
object to that. Wait a minute.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
There's
Yeah,
the
just
other
a,
end of
just a quick technical question. For the supplemental budget, is 4 and 5 also going back to the full council, or they're just being archived?
I think 4 and 5 are part of the supplemental budget, but I think they're both informational. We're not going to vote on either one. So I think we can keep them in the archive, but what I'm saying is all city councilors have copies of 4 and 5. It's the mayor's executive summary report and then the copy of Ezekiel's plan. So we don't vote on them, but they certainly are references to with the supplemental budget. So maybe just keep them archived and
So
attached.
Okay, thank you.
That help you?
And, yeah, 9 as well?
Yeah, 9 is the city solicitor's response, so it just becomes the answer to Councilor Bartley's order, right? So we
Okay,
can
just want to make sure I don't put things in the committee reports unnecessarily.
No, I get it. Any further discussion? Motion to adjourn. All those in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right, John Boy.